meeting. If there's a man in black and everybody's concerned about it, it's Tom Tartaglio, who's our district justice. He's a wonderful guy, and he came tonight to swear our people in that need to be sworn in. And you just got to sit there and wait for just a little while,
I'm good.
Sir.
I'm good.
And then you can go off to wherever you need to go from here. He did tell me that he will stay for those that are going to use his service tonight. For those that want to take pictures, he's willing to do that for a little while. But he does, he's like the Santa Claus on Christmas. He's got to get going at some point. He's not allowed to stick around here. So with that said, I would like to ask David Shuey to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, as well as the moment of silence. And we'll start off here in the right place.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone, please remain standing. Do a moment of silence for our first responders and our troops at home and abroad. Thank you.
For those that aren't used to being here, or certainly on the first meeting of the year, this is a two-step meeting. It's a reorganization meeting followed by a regular meeting. So if you don't want to stay, it's perfectly okay. I know we have some people that might stay, but you don't have to stay. So we'll take a little break between the two and go from there. In the meantime, I need to announce that this meeting, as well as the next meeting, are live streamed, which means that if you're asked to say something or want to say something, you must come up and get very close to that microphone and clearly give your name and address so that the people that are on the streaming can realize who you are, because we'll hear you and see you. But if you don't stand there, they won't be able to see you. So you can't talk from back in where you are. That said, the first item to do, just in case anyone wants to know the reason that I'm here, is because in our life, the former chairman, was not reelected, and I was the vice chairman at the time, and somebody has to run this meeting to get it started, which happens to be me. So with that, the first piece of information we must do is elect a chairman for this year.
Swearing in. We gotta make these guys.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Tom, you scared me. You took me the black scared me, I must admit. I know most of you people here are probably here for the benefit of Michelle and John. So, Tom, why don't you come down here, tell everybody what you want to know, what you're going to do, what a wonderful guy you are, and how wonderful we are.
I'll say that. He's a terrific gentleman.
Good evening, board. Good evening, everyone.
Fine citizen.
And he also has his office in one of our buildings.
Yes, my landlord, thank you.
That was parody.
So there you go. Michelle and John, you're going to have what time? Where's Michelle over there? Oh, Michelle's over there. Sure.
I am. I'm going to talk for my husband. Absolutely. Hold up. Yep. Let's start with me.
No,
All right.
if you can just raise your. No,
All right.
if you can just raise your right hand, place your left hand on the Bible there, you can repeat after me. I, and state your full name,
I, Michelle Denise Pruitt,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
and I will discharge the duties
And I will discharge the duties
of Township Supervisor
of Township Supervisor
in East Goshen Township,
in East Goshen Township.
Chester County, with fidelity. Congratulations to you.
Michelle, do you have anybody here who wants to do pictures before John gets?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and let John.
Okay, John.
Yeah. Everybody did it.
Get somebody to hold the Bible? Here we go.
Very good. I, and state your full name,
I, John Ritz,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
and the Constitution of this country.
I will discharge the duties
This is
of Township Supervisor
the
in East Goshen Township, Chester County. With fidelity. Congratulations.
Anybody want to do pictures?
John, a quick picture with the two of us. Judge. Okay, we'll just be quick. We can get the rest of the board in.
We've got
Thank you.
John, you here?
Yes.
John.
All right, I got some work to do.
Thank you.
Like my peanut butter with you.
Thanks,
Tom,
guys.
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Night, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Tom. So, okay, with that, we'll keep moving right along. The next item is 6A, that is the election of the chairman for this year. Is there a motion from somebody here to do that?
I'm gonna make a motion to, elect Marty Shane as chairman for the year 2020 for the Board of Supervisors.
I'll second.
I would like to make a motion.
Maybe you can only make one motion at a time. We have to vote on that one, then there's another motion if you want to make a motion.
There's
There's
a
only one
motion and
motion
a
allowed on the
second.
floor at a time. With a second,
Open for discussion.
that's the way it works.
I understand that. What are we voting on exactly?
Chairman, B,
Okay,
this room.
I wanted to nominate somebody for
That's
chairman.
okay. If I don't get 3 votes, then that'll be open again for the next one. If I get 3, I'm chairman.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
There's a motion on the floor, John, and that's been seconded. There's discussion, and then there is a vote. And in this case, with 3 get the, if there are 3 votes for that particular motion, then the motion passes. If it doesn't, if there's not a 3rd vote, then that motion sits, and another motion can be brought forward.
Okay,
Yeah, you can discuss, because the board now has the option to discuss anything it wants to discuss. So you can say whatever you want to say. And then the people out here have an opportunity to say whatever they want to say. If anybody chooses to do anything, again, they have to come up to them.
The fact that we're in discussion mode with the motion, I will comment that I had an interest at the point to serve as chair, but my schedule is just not permissive to do that. I'm too busy with my work, employed full-time, have other responsibilities. And I look to Marty as a senior supervisor who has many years of experience, and so that I felt that he would be in a good position to bring the new board through 2020 with years in front of us. That will rotate as it typically does. John and Michelle, David, you know that from year to year. But I thought that would be a good way to bring us into through the year 2020.
all right. Well, that's good for me to hear because I was going to nominate you, Mike. Not that I don't like Marty, but I thought you would be more even-handed.
You're very nice. My wife tells me that no one likes me, but now.
Heck, I was gonna second you. I thought the same. I think you bring a very measured voice to the board.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other new ones? Call the question. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The next item is business is to elect a vice. I'm sure John very much appreciates your concern, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. Thank you that Mike had expressed that, his feelings to me before, and that he is very busy over in East Bradford with the work that he's doing, and sooner or later he's going to retire.
End of this year.
For the end of this year? Well, good for you.
Then I'm gonna find another job.
A real job. We're now down to item 6B for those that have the agenda. It's the election of the vice chairman. Is there anybody who likes to make a motion with respect to that? If not, I would recognize, and put on the table, for Vice Chairman David Shuey. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Is there any comments or questions from the board, from the audience? All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
David, board.
Congrats.
Next item on the agenda is item 6C, and that's the appointment of the police commissioner. Mike has already agreed to do that.
Excuse me,
That needs somebody to provide a motion and get on with that act.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to nominate John Herzog for that position.
Do we have any comments? I would say, let me say this.
I'll second it.
There's nothing, everybody can serve, but I will say this, that as a new supervisor, you have a lot to learn. And you add an element of that if you want to become police commissioner, not that you couldn't do it. You can, I'm not suggesting you don't, I'm just suggesting that based on my experience, it's very difficult when you first come on the board to catch up with where everything, well, the rules and regulations that you live by, but also where you are in the things that we got already on the table. So if you're welcome to do that, if you want to, if not, that's fine.
The reason I would like to nominate John is because he's a lawyer, he has a lot of arbitration experience. He has an extensive background in working with multi-million dollar, $30 million budgets. And he's gone to mediation and arbitration. So I think that he'd be a really great asset in this regard. And that's why I think that John would be a tremendous asset to this position.
Anybody want to say anything out in the audience? I'll call the question. All those in the motion to appoint John as police commissioner?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
4-1, John. Todd also, that is.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item 6D, which is the point of representative from the board to the pension committee. It's resolution 2020-4. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'd like to nominate Dave Shuey.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Is there comments from the board? I know from my fact of being with David for a couple years, he's probably the best choice on this board to do that because of his financial background. And I would hope that he would be willing to serve. I have no idea if he is or not, but if he is, I certainly would support that. Is there anybody else have any comments? Anybody have comments from the audience? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 That's pretty sound.
Good.
Well, welcome to that, David. Something else for you to do. How about that? Next item is 6E. That is the point of representative to the Westchester Area Council of Governments, Resolution 2020-4A. It's a little typo error there if it shows you're following this. With that, is there a motion to nominate our representative for the COG committee?
I nominate Michelle Pruitt.
I would say that Michelle would be fine, there's no problem with it. I would say historically, it meets about 4 or 5 times a year. They have a number of things going on. Mike has been doing that for quite some time, both in his position here and his position, I think, out in East Bradford.
Yeah.
So I just mentioned that, not that it's nothing against Michelle whatsoever. I'm just mentioning it as a fact of life.
I'd actually like to decline that nomination. Thank you, John. I appreciate it because I think that Mike is better suited for that particular role.
Okay.
And I actually would like to go as far as saying that I would like to nominate you for that position.
I'll second that.
Is anybody going to comment on that?
Michelle, you will be informed of when the meetings occur, and
I might go with you.
We have a
Before that.
continuation of the energy transition plan, which is in
Great.
the final stages, so it'd be good
We'll
to
work on it. That'd be great.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience want to comment on anything? All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. That takes care of that. The next item is item F, and that's the appointment of township officials. For those that have the list that's there, most everybody is known to everybody in here. There's nobody that's been snuck in here, as one might say. I can read it if everybody wants. If not, I'll vote on it. Is there any comments or questions for the board members?
I suggest that we skip the reading and just vote on
Consensus.
Anybody? Leo, one up here, nice and close to the microphone, please. Address, name.
Leo Sinclair, 217 Lockwood Lane, here in East Goshen. My only question I have is regarding the fire marshal. Would that position still be considered an unpaid volunteer position? Pardon me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to move that
Dan, wait a
we,
minute, Dan's out.
All right, just a quick question on this, because I'm used to experience these lump resolutions out in Harrisburg a number of times. I'm curious, is it normal practice to lump 14 different, I think it was 14, I'll have to do check or something like that, together into a single vote? It kind of, I mean, the list looks, as you already said, you look at the list, we know who all these people are.
Yes,
so
we can, and sometimes we lump the succeeding ones together that makes sense to go together, just for speed purposes.
And it's
But we can
actually-
do it.
it's actually a single resolution.
do you know what most townships typically do, though? Is it
And
normally
as
done
an
something
example,
like
East
this?
Bradford, we do a consensus on the staff and the professionals, typically in one motion. It's
If you
It's
prefer.
a
to
pretty
hear them all,
common practice amongst municipalities.
If you prefer to hear them all.
Well, yeah,
No, I don't have a problem with that. I would recommend in the future that you break it up into separate votes, only because it denies individual members to take a position. You know, if there's one, let's say you've got 14 positions you're voting on. If there's one where you disagree, you can't vote no on that one. And then that puts all 5 of you in the position of potentially having to defend.
You can make a motion to carve that person out. and
Yeah,
have
that's
discussion
exactly,
about it.
and so if there is a particular, if there's a second, then for open discussion, a comment can be made to say, I'm not comfortable, I'd like to put a pin in this one and discuss it later, let's hold. That's not unusual, that could be a standard part of the motion procedure, Dan.
Very good, thanks for the explanation.
Just so everybody knows, because we have somebody from the audience here tonight, we get a book each weekend before the meeting that tells us what's going to be discussed that time, and including this. So every year when this comes out at the reorganization meeting, we would see this as well as what's put on the website, the Rick puts on the website. So anybody that wants to come to the meeting or pick up the agenda outside would know that, Dan. But we have pared down some of this over time, and some of it you'll see where we group it together, but we don't have to do that. So it's just whether you want to do it or not. Based on the comments that we had, I would say that everybody's comfortable with everybody on here. There's only 2 people that said anything. If there's, I'm going to do a diplomatic thing. For those that would like me to read this, would just raise your hand. If not, I will call a question. I will call a question. All those in favor of the motion to appoint this list of representatives?
Who made the motion?
Somebody was- somebody did make a motion.
John did.
I made the motion, I don't know if it was seconded.
It was not seconded, I will second that motion.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions up here in the audience? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you very much.
I will comment that as our packets are delivered to us each, supervisors each week, the township, East Goshen, does a great job of putting the entire packet on the website, with the exception that unless there's an executive session matter, personnel, a legal matter. I looked at it this week online, and I think it was a total of about 174 pages. So there's no, was that right, Julia? It was about 174 pages. In case you don't know, Julia Loving is representative from Representative Committee's office. So I mentioned that because there's a lot of stuff there. It takes a while to download that one, but it's all there. We got it.
You know, Ricky just whispered in my ear, he appreciates your counting all the pages.
I read them all, Item
Item G is to reappoint the township employees. I will tell you from my experience, we have probably the finest group of township employees in Chester County. And I would certainly hope that everybody would want us to reappoint them. Some of them are here, they are tonight, aren't they, Mark?
Here.
And some of them, and yes,
I can't make it a, you reappoint these employees every year?
yes. Yes, you have to do it by law.
That's not a very good job security situation.
No, it's interesting you say that because for years, there was the erroneous understanding with many citizens that, well, if you get a job in government, you're, just wait till your pension comes in. But we are all at-will employees. Where I am in East Bradford Township, I'm a former manager and now CFO or Director of Finance. I'm appointed, I hope they appointed me tonight, reappointed me, but we are at-will employees. So usually, if there's going to be a change, someone is not going to be reappointed as a staff employee, they will know that in advance, and there would be a smooth transition, a professional approach to it. But reappointment every year is the standard bill.
If Mike notices that he's a little nervous tonight, this is why. I realized, I forgot the fact that he has to be appointed tonight over in East Bradford, so
They're going to put up with me for one more year, I think.
you might get a round of applause, Mike.
Year 30.
The next item is H.
Anybody
out there have any comments? All those in
Wait,
favor
no,
of the motion?
Marty, start again. There's no, somebody made a motion, somebody
Somebody
seconded.
seconded. Go ahead about that.
I'd like to move that we reappoint the township employees per resolution 2020-6.
I'll second it.
Is there any more comments up here on the board from the audience? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, John. Thank you very much. The next resolution.
And I would like to jump in on this one because there's an error. The township has a investment policy statement that guides basically the prism through which I make investment decisions about township funds. And so the motion for me to make investments at banks paying the best rate of interest with the best terms is oversimplifies what our investment policy statement says. So all you need to do with this one is just appoint depositories for township funds.
Okay, John, thank you. For that, we will do it that way. Is there anybody who wants to make a motion to respect it? Resolution 2020-7. I'd make a motion that we accept it. We adopt resolution 2020-7. Is there a second?
Yeah, I will second that.
Comments from the board? From the audience? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you, John.
Unanimous, John. Thank you very much. Appreciate your concern. Next item is item I, which is certified delegates to the PSAS convention. That's the convention for this township elected officials and staff up in Hershey. It's held once a year. It's very informative, and I would ask that whoever makes the motion indicates who's eligible for that. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that approval of resolution 2020-8, appointing the 5 supervisors, manager and assistant manager as delegates, and as a voting delegate, Rick Smith, and as an alternative voting delegate, John Mitchell.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Yes, John did. Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, the PSAS is the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. It's a large group, 3,500 of us. And one of the things they do is they take on issues on behalf of municipalities, townships, and boroughs across the state. And so the voting delegates vote on issues facing Pennsylvania municipalities in general. And some of these are very important. They run the gamut of every operation, stormwater, sewer, emergency services, everything that we deal with. And they take on issues, they lobby in Harrisburg on behalf of municipalities. So it's a really good organization, and voting delegates is an important role. So.
Yeah, I'll follow that up with David. Here's a good example. The Township News comes out each month with timely issues. There's seasonal ones, whether it's the organization meeting and preparing for that, whether it's budgets or topical issues that are of importance, like current legislation. And for instance, this one, the January 2020 issue, the Supervisors Starter Pack, Township Government 101 meeting and minutes basis, advice, 6 leaders, 6 lessons learned, resources, where to find training, publications, and more. Attend our boot camps. In fact, Michelle and John are attending the boot camp, so they're taking full advantage of this professional association. It's a very fine one. There's a lot of variety in Pennsylvania amongst the 20, let's see, second class townships. There are 1,726 or something like that, 1,700 plus townships of the second class as we are. There's a lot of varieties of us out there, particularly between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Lots of varieties. And so an organization like this can really fill in a lot of important information in the process of operating and managing the local government. So we really appreciate the services they provide.
Yeah, just so you know, we have had, at least as I recall, one supervisor make a suggestion, and believe it or not, that was suggestion to turn your headlights on when it's raining. That suggestion went through the local part of PSS, which is CATO, the Chester County Association of Township Officials, and worked its way up, and it was voted in favor of doing it. And as David explained, it was lobbied and it was passed, and that's why you have turn your lights on when your windshield wipers are on. And Mary Powell, when she was a supervisor, who's now retired, did that. So it was kind of interesting. I would tell you, just as a little sidelight, 30-some years ago, when I went to my first meeting up in Harrisburg, I went up with Ricky, of course, and I would say that at least 25% of the people that were there had big overalls on. It just goes to show you the difference between what we are as a very mature, large township, relatively speaking, and some of those townships that may not have more than 1,000 people or less than 1,000 people. And that's why you see some people that think that some of these small townships should be merged together, and for economy reasons, and others too, just as and that will happen probably, because it's very difficult to keep yourself going when you're that small. So that's just a little bit of background that you might be interested in knowing. And thank you, Michael, for the update. I didn't forget this time. All those comments? Huh? Okay, sorry.
We're good?
You're making me very nervous up here, you know that? I'm nervous with you.
Well, this next one's a good one because it has to do with holidays.
All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Did you two vote down there?
We already voted.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
We did? Good for us.
Well, we got talking.
Then we got Mike sidetracked me. The next is items J and K, and I'm going to put them together, Dan, because one has to do with the holiday schedule of the township, and the other has to do with the confirmation of the meeting schedule for the year. Do we do that just for just for us or for everybody?
It lists all the meetings.
All the
It's
agencies.
a basically the ad that was in the daily local news.
If you go on the website, you can find the date that any one of our ABCs, authorities, boards, or commissions meet, in addition to us, which is the first and third Tuesday. Although we got smart several years ago, and now when we prepare this, we hog every Tuesday for the whole year, so we don't have to advertise, which saves the township a bunch of money.
David reminded us.
In order to do that as a consent agenda, there are 2 separate resolutions. We'd have to vote on combining those as a consent agenda, so I just suggest we consider them separately.
Okay, then let's vote on item 2020-9, which is the holiday schedule for the township.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll make the second.
Anybody else in the audience have a comment? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. The next item is the second one, which is the confirmation of the meeting schedule for us as well as.
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments from the audience? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The next item, L, is the confirmation of the Keystone Collection Agency is the earned income tax and local service tax collector for the township resolution 2020-11.
2011.
Can't read either. Is there a motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion and,
Second.
Comments from the board?
I'll just share with folks about that. The Keystone Collection Agency, which collects for each municipality in Chester County, earned income tax and also LST or local services tax, primarily EIT is the really big one. Under a state act, earned income tax was consolidated within the county structure. What about 12 years ago now? Is it? And so what happens is each county forms a tax collection committee. We have the Chester County Tax Collection Committee, which oversees in this case, the Keystone Collection Agency, or group to collect the earned income tax. They went through an arduous process to an RFP to select the vendor. There are audits, there are bonds provided each year, and it is the committee has done a very good job. They're made up of members of the local government, and it's administered the committee out of the Chester County Intermediate Unit off of Boot Road. So it's turned out to be a very effective means for collection. They're a reputable company. They've continued to reduce the commission rate that they make on collections each year, each contract period. And for those municipalities, again, particularly that are out more in the hinterlands, this consolidation has been a very effective means for them to make sure they're collecting all that they can.
I would say that John is our representative and one of our employees, Chris Boylan, is our alternate. Daniel, would you say something?
When you're ready for public comment on this, yes.
Anybody else have any comments up here? Go ahead.
I'd like to give you a little bit of feedback from an employer's perspective regarding.
Excuse me, sir,
Keystone.
name and address.
Good news, I'm going back to Texas soon. Just a real quick thing on Keystone Collections. I know while I was state representative, I got a lot of complaints from constituents about Keystone Collections, inefficiencies and just general stupidity in terms of how they treated employers. And for my part in particular, I had one employee who worked so few hours every year that he collected less than $12,000 a year in income, which meant that he wasn't required to pay the local services tax. So at the first quarter, they would send me a notice saying, hey, we noticed you have this many employees, but you only submitted this much LST. Defend yourself, notice of violation, this big scary thing. And I would write them back and send them a copy of a note signed by the employee saying he was going to get less than $12,000 a year and so forth. And again, 3 months later, I get another notice, the exact same thing. As an employer, that's very irritating and it takes up time. And the kind of business I'm in, a professional services business, that's taking time away from what I can do for my customers. I wanted to provide that feedback to you that while they might be great from your perspective as a township side, from the constituent or the individual or the businesses, we don't like them a whole lot.
Well, Dan, I appreciate that comment. Most of my experience, and so that adds to my perspective, because in my role in East Bradford, most of my inquiries are from citizens, not employers. And the service has been very effective for them. They will call, I've got this notice, they're a bit disconcerted. We could contact Keystone that seems to reconcile it well without, in a very timely manner and effectively. But I hadn't heard the perspective from the employer, so that's appreciated. I will share with you, and Dan, you may be familiar with this, in the past year, 2 years, I guess it goes now. And Julia Loving, you're probably familiar with this. There was a resolution that was passed in Harrisburg to examine whether or not Harrisburg should take over the local earned income tax collection, whether that would be something that would be beneficial to the citizens of the Commonwealth and municipalities to collect it at in Harrisburg, if you will. That did not get to committee, and it certainly didn't get to the floor was something I was not supportive of. Harrisburg does some good things, but I think that local taxes should be collected locally. And overall, as I say, Keystone has done an effective job there, but I do appreciate the perspective. Thanks, Dan.
John, do you want to add anything? Good or bad?
I mean, I don't disagree with what Mr. Truitt said.
To be sure.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have any perspective of how Berkheimer did this because that was before my time too. So it's a W you know versus a W don't. And we also have we're hamstrung in that under Act 34, we have to essentially do it at the county level. So this is to some extent a formality.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, all those, anybody comments out there? All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Thank you very much.
Nay.
Okay.
You two have been making
No,
nice.
don't, Mark.
Heard me complain about it every 3 months.
As long as we're the love warriors, everything's fun. We're all one big happy family. The next item is M. It's the Employment Valley LLP is the independent auditors for the township. Resolution 2012. Is there a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we accept Resolution 2012 and appoint Mullally LLP as independent auditors for the township.
I'll second.
Comments from the board?
John, you remain, have confidence in the auditor?
Yeah, they do a good job. They're pretty they're pretty thorough. They're getting better.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I need to interrupt or take a leave here. I just want to go this way. I'll leave you.
Sorry.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All right, good New Year to you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Do I need to state for the record who I am again? No, I guess we'll make sure. Okay, actually, a couple questions. Just for the record, this is not the firm that was responsible for the audit down in Kent Township, is that correct?
As far as I know, I don't know who it was off the top of my head. Who did get it?
I don't know who did Kenneth.
In other words, it could be them.
I said, I don't know who did Kenneth.
No, it was not them.
We can find out that information. But Leo, I'm 99.9% sure it wasn't Manley because that would have triggered some alarm bells if I had read it. I can get back to you in the morning about who it was.
The only reason I asked is because I want the audience to understand that down in Kent Township, there was an individual in the township, in fact, was embezzling money, over millions of dollars of money was embezzled.
3.25.
Right, correct. So that's why I'm curious and concerned, whether that's the same firm or not. Forgive me, I had time to do my homework on this.
I'm sorry.
So, actually, question is, in regards to this audit, will it be a forensic audit or will it just be a statutory audit?
No, all municipalities are required to do a partial accrual audit in conformance with CASB Rule 34. We need to do it in order to get insurance. We need to do it in order to, pretty much do anything in the financial markets. So it's not a forensic. A forensic audit would be if there was like as in Kennett, where there was an allegation of conclusive allegation of fraud.
Yeah.
This is just standard. I mean, there's a handful of things that they're checking on. The most important thing is all the money accounted for, every last cent accounted for, but also to make sure that you have proper internal controls so that, for example, like a situation in Kennett couldn't occur, so that there's a segregation of duties, so you have different people doing different functions. There's always one person checking what the other person's doing. You have, at least 2 check signers. I mean, they had that technically in Kennett, but obviously Ms. Moore found a way to get around that. That's the gist of a standard of a financial audit.
Okay.
It's also important to note that
Yeah,
the state also audits how many of our separate funds.
Yeah, well, so the state also audits our state liquid fuel fund. That's the money that you pay when you fill up the pump. At the pump, some of that money goes to, that tax goes to the local municipalities, some of it stays with the state. We get an audit about every 2 years for that. And every 3 years, we have an audit of the state aid that we get for pensions.
Fire relief.
The fire relief gets audited, I believe, annually. That doesn't really go to, it technically goes to us, we just pass it through to the fire company. And I guess that's it as far as formal state level audits.
Okay, so at no point can the residents of our township request a forensic audit. A forensic audit could only occur if certain triggers were to occur. Is that yes or no?
I don't know that that's true. I
Well,
think the
no.
board at its discretion could do
Sure.
it. I mean, it would just be expensive. I mean,
Yeah, it is a very
Yeah.
expensive audit, but it is, if there was some indication, Leo, that there was an impropriety, if there was a discrepancy in funds, accounts are not balancing, if there was say a substantial change in an important revenue from one year to the next, that might trigger certainly an inquiry that could go deeper into, in the sizing audit as a forensic. But it's usually not, it is quite expensive. The audit that we do annually is 20-some
No,
thousand.
it's 32.
Is it
Yeah.
32? I know the one that we do, East Bradford Township, is half the size of East Goshen. Our audit is about 13,000 a year. And I know they're doing samples. I provide a large stack of general ledgers to our auditor. It is a gentleman and a firm that I know well, but they maintain a very strict firewall in our convivialities, and as information is exchanged and provided. All of our bank statements, all of our monthly financials, which are balanced to the penny, are examined. It's a pretty thorough audit, but as far as forensics, digging deeper, I'm not even sure I know all the details of a forensic
Yeah, I
audit.
mean, that would be like
It would have to be
FBI.
an indication from my standpoint to vote on expenditure like that and a process of that nature.
I think it's important for everybody to know to hear that if you follow that, which I happen to do because I like that kind of stuff, in the Kenneth situation, there was a lot of internal control that was given to that particular person who was, I think, the township manager. We do not have that here. We have a lot of internal controls. In addition to which, we have a finance committee that consists of some of Rick, Mike, and John, and David and myself, or at least as was David and myself, for a period of time, that most of this stuff we go over with anyway, on top of what the controls are. And the state audits in particular are very big on recognizing whether you have adequate controls or not. And we do get ours with a high degree of approval when they do that. So I want to compliment John and Rick for the work that they do down there with their people, because I think that you folks that are here tonight should be assured that the one thing that we do really well, we do many things well, but one thing that we really do well is to maintain the handle on the finances of the township and don't let anything get ahead of us. And I just want to assure you that, you're in good hands as they stay at State Farm.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, if I could just make a comment. I appreciate the fact that Leo brought to our attention the question, is this the firm that perhaps, of one of the firms that could have been potentially involved with that audit? And I'd like to just ask, is there any option for us to be able to revoke this reappointment, revoke this resolution to reappoint this particular firm in the event we find that they have been involved?
No, well, actually, a eagle-eyed accountant in the back of the room
Thank
sent
you.
me something just
Excellent.
now that it looks like the name of it was Barbican.
I thought it was.
Yeah, it was
I was gonna
Barbican.
say,
Yeah, thank you very much. Ms.
thank
Boyle.
you.
Yeah.
So no worries then on that one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the floor? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Next item is N, it's to designate the emergency services providers. It is resolution 2020-13. For those that don't know, there are two types of providers. There's the regular EMTs and the fire companies, then there's the higher level EMTs. The fire companies, the Goshen Fire Company covers most of the township. If you live in the northern sector of the township, which I do, we are covered by Malvern. And it's important for you to know whether you're East Goshen or Goshen Fire Company or Malvern, because if anything were to happen at your house, you need to tell I've been informed that it's much better, rather than letting them try to find out themselves, to tell emergency services when you call that you are Malvern, not Goshen, which you would automatically think that you are. Now, with respect to the high-level EMTs, we have two providers. Malvern provides the northern half of the township, almost divided right in half, and one of the Westchester fire companies provide the service for the other part of the township. They do a good fellowship. They do a wonderful job, but it's a tough job, and we're very conscious of the environment that they find themselves in, where there's a lack of volunteers available in most places now, and it leads you to have paid personnel, and that does exist with us, and it will continue to exist with us for as long as we can see. So it's just another expense that we have on top of every expense we have. So, but the point of the matter is, you need to know where you are in the system. So if you need to call 911, you can tell them exactly where you are, so they don't have to look for it. It does come up when there's stuff they should know, but there's nothing wrong with you telling them in the first place who you are, what you are, and where you are. So I encourage you to do that. You can call in here to the township building and talk to Rick or any of the people, and they'll tell you where you are. The northern part of the township, with respect to fire, is not too much. It's probably a very minor percentage of the township, but it's enough to be concerned about, because you don't want somebody to go to the wrong house. And that's the answer to the question. So with that, did we have a second? Do we have a motion?
No motion yet.
We did not have a motion yet. Is someone going to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-13, designating the current emergency service providers another year of assignment.
Second.
Is there comments from the board, from the audience, good or bad? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the service. The next is a little bit different, and I apologize. It's going to be, and you'll notice it has to do with our fee schedule. And the reason it's a little bit different is John has prepared some information for us to consider with respect to some of the fees which he thinks are, in some cases, significantly lower than what they should be, and in some cases, they haven't been adjusted for a long period of time. So before we talk about that amongst ourselves, I would ask John to share what his findings are and what his recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as we've been discussing now for the last, I guess, 8 months or so, some proposed fee increases. I think the most important one for the folks here is the refuse fee for those of us on the township's trash collection contract. So it doesn't apply if you live in a multifamily development or in Hershey's Mill Villages, only really single-family detached homes. We're proposing to increase that by $5.12 per quarter to $75 per quarter. The reason that fee increase is needed, in my opinion, is because the fairly sharp increase in the cost of processing recyclables. As many of you know, China is no longer accepting U.S. recyclables, so basically the market demand for plastic and glass and cardboard has plummeted. As a result, we're getting charged, we the township are getting charged more to have those recyclables picked up. The other sort of major one I want to bring to your attention is sewer and refuse certification. So if you either sell or refinance your property, your title company will send in a certification request to all of the various entities, whether they're utilities or municipalities that levy fees or taxes against you, to basically make sure that your taxes and fees are all paid up. Right now, we have by far the lowest sewer and refuse cert fees in the area. We charge $5 total for both sewer and refuse. So in other words, if you only have sewer and don't have refuse, because you live, say, in Summit House or vice versa, if you live on Hudson Circle, but they don't have public sewer, but they do have refuse, you pay $5 for that. So basically what we're proposing is, now the woman in the back of the room is actually in charge of, Chris Boylan is actually in charge of issuing the certs. We estimate that it takes about $12 worth of staff time and materials to issue a combined sewer and refuse cert. So what we're proposing is going from $5 for sewer and refuse certs together to $5 for sewer certs and $5 for refuse certs. So we're getting close to recovering all of our costs, while at the same time not putting a burden on our, not kind of usuriously overcharging for certs. I know the school district charges like $60 for certs, and there's simply no way that the cost of the service being provided is $60. But I do feel that $5 each is getting us in the ballpark. At that rate will be the same rate as what West Goshen charges, and somewhat below some of the other municipalities in the area. And then finally, there's a sort of a hodgepodge of permit-related fees. We haven't touched permit fees as long as I've been here, in 8 years. And this really isn't for, normally if you get like a bathroom remodel or a kitchen remodel or do an addition, basically the permit fee works out to $1, 1% of the total remodeling, which reflects basically the cost that the hiring the inspectors and having the inspectors go in back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to make sure that the building is up to code. Really what we're talking about, so we're not talking about that, changing that 1%, but what we are talking about is changing all of the fees, the permit fees that are related to things like stormwater. As you know, with the stormwater rules, it's a lot more onerous for our building inspectors and have to keep going back and forth and back and forth. Another major thing is, and actually a big source of permit activity is decking jobs. A lot of our housing stock was built in the 80s and 90s. Those original decks, the structure underneath is rotting away. That's just when you get a deck permit, it's not just a matter of just putting new boards on top of the existing frame, but of actually looking to make sure there's no rotted frame underneath. That rotted frame breaks, that's when catastrophic accidents happen. So we want to have a fee schedule that reflects that our inspectors are going out multiple times to these properties. So all of the proposed fees are summarized here. Collectively, all of those permit fee increases, as I estimated, will only add $7,000 of revenue to the township budget in a given year. So it's not a major fee increases that we're talking about. In any event, all of these fee increases are reflected in the 2020 adopted budget.
Is there a motion to approve what John's suggestion is?
I'll move that we adopt the fee schedule as proposed in resolution 2020-34 that John just summarized.
Is there a second?
Second.
I would comment to the folks that what John said basically is we want to have a user-based service. That is, those that use it pay what they should pay without overdoing it and without trying to get extra money from people, which we don't think is fair. But it eliminates the need to put certain things in the general fund budget where everybody pays. So I think it's a great way of doing things. I do think that it is time to bring some things up to where it belongs. And I'm definitely, I don't like to have any increase in anything. And sometimes it's just necessary, and I think this is one of those occasions. So with that, I would ask if there's any comments from.
Yes, I do have some comments here. This gentleman heads up. My comment is that, and another way of what Marty said is that if I'm putting on an addition on my home, that I should be paying for those costs of the staff and the local government to do the proper inspections and make sure it is in code, and it shouldn't be subsidized by all the residents of the township. So that's another reason. One specific comment I would make is I still feel that the sewer and refuse certs are too low.
And Mike, I'll rebut that, politely rebut that a little bit. One of the things about certs, and everybody cover yours for a second, they are subject to right to know requests. So if you raise them too high, then people can just write to know, or really title companies can issue right to know requests. So if you gotta be careful how high you jack them up.
That's a very good point.
So I was kidding about covering.
Rebuttal accepted and appreciated.
And I'd like to ask questions after this gentleman's.
My name is John Pizzo, I live on Larch Lane. How about the reading of the sewer? They charge you to read the sewer every 3 months.
Oh, yeah, so we
Meters.
charge $8, so.
Is that going to
Yeah,
remain the
no, that's
same?
gonna remain the same. So, Mr. Pizzo, are you have a well?
Yes.
Yeah, so you have the sub meter on your
Right,
well.
right, which I put in
Yeah,
myself.
We're not gonna.
That remains the same?
That's the same.
Thank you.
I just have a couple quick questions, and I don't know if John or Rick or maybe even Mark in the back would be able to answer. So I'm just curious, I agree, I think it's time to come up to 2020 with some of these fees, especially user-based fees. I think that's really important, so that we're not all paying for my edition or yours. And, but my question is, are there a lot of, we'll say, final inspections where you have to go back repeatedly as a township to have staff go out repeatedly to get that final inspection approved? And I think that it's the best one, I'm sorry to ask.
But that's why you wonder who this character is.
Because-
I was just gonna
Says Mark
Yes,
Gordon,
Mark Gordon.
our code enforcement.
And the reason I ask is because I wanna make sure that like, are the homeowners being charged for additional re-inspections when staff has to go out more times than they really should have to go?
So I think two answers to your question is, the first is, no, we don't spend a whole lot of time going out. Our inspectors have a really good relationship with most contractors. We're fortunate in this part of the state, in our community, to have, good contractors. We're not chasing them most of the time. Final inspections are the toughest one to nail people down for, because they're done with their project and they kind of forget about us. But my guys are really diligent about reminding them, please call for final. We do have a mechanism in the fee schedule that allows us to charge for missed inspections. So if we show up and the guy's not ready and he scheduled an inspection, we can do that.
Okay,
I
good.
think I've only done it twice in my whole career, because
You try not to.
people were they were taking advantage of us every single time we went out. He wasn't ready 3 times in a row. I was stood up and said, that's ridiculous. So, but
I just wanted to make
we
sure.
have that mechanism there.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the township employees' time is actually being covered. And I just wanted to make sure that there was.
Yeah,
method in
and we
place.
haven't raised these fees since 2012, I think is what, last we looked at them. So we all felt it was time to bring it up a little bit. So, any other questions?
Mark, if you weren't listening, you were reappointed.
I was here, so I appreciate that. So, yeah, our township engineer, he left right after he got reappointed, so I stuck around.
Mike is still wondering if he would.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I haven't received an email yet. I don't know what to say.
Is there, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That's a lot of work.
The next item is P. It's resolution 2020-65. Is to authorize participation in the municipal risk management workers' compensation pool trust. If anybody wants to know, I can have John tell you what that's about. If not, I'll entertain a motion in a second and we'll get on with it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we adopt resolution 2020-65, authorizing participation in the municipal risk management workers' comp pool trust.
I'll second that motion.
Anybody want to know what that means?
Means we better have it.
No, we don't have to do that. Anybody have any comments out there? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
And last but not least, we have Q, and Q is to announce the continuation of all the applicable resolutions that have been adopted previously that weren't covered this evening. So, is there a motion to,
You don't need to re-announce it.
I did a great job, didn't I, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, that's the end of the entertainment part of this committee. We will take about a 10-minute break, and we will reconvene for the regular township meeting that we have. You're certainly welcome to come. The facilities are right in the back on the left-hand side. We have unisex bathrooms, but it generally works out that the men are on this side and the ladies are on that side, if you want to go that direction. And with that, I thank everybody for coming. I welcome John and Michelle on here. It's
Yep,
nice to see
absolutely.
Dan and everybody else.
And the regular meeting, probably, I'm gonna guess, because I only have enough patience to go till 8:30 today. About another 9, so if you wanna hang in there after we reconvene.
So there you go. Give us 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all I need. Pardon me?
Yeah.
10 minutes. Keep going, keep going.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, good to see you, Jeff. Right back. Congratulations, welcome aboard.
I wish I could go. I'm sure.
This was saying and including. Now it's just aches. That's like my work. Yeah. This year? Next year. Yeah, you go to a party, shake a few, get a picture of who sees it. You were there, did you see me? Yeah.
Oh, how you doing?
actually do most of That's right. Good job next year. Good job next year. I understand your concern. I enjoy the Are you doing much there now?
Nice to meet you. I actually saw the, yeah, they were gonna talk about it. I drove up and I got to the street and everything, checked it nice, I'm on it. I'm trying.
Okay. I'm 2 minutes late. It's all Dan's fault.
That's okay.
So I just want you to know where the problem lies. I've been asked to have one of the agenda items moved up so that they can go home and go to sleep. So I will be glad and happy to do that as long as I'm not taking anybody else's position in the order. So we will do the Larch Lane thing now and get that out of the way unless somebody really is gonna have a hissy fit over that, which I don't think. So Rick, why don't you explain to where everybody is, what we're gonna do, what we recommend? Because I told the folks that you have spent a lot of time on this.
The Larch Lane is a short cul-de-sac just off of Reservoir Road, south side of the township, about 20 feet wide. Apparently there is a resident who lives on Reservoir Road across the street, has frequent house guests over the weekend, Friday, Saturday night. And the house guests, as opposed to parking in the driveway of the residents on Reservoir, park overnight on Larch Lane. So we've received a petition signed by a number of people who live on Larch Lane requesting that the board prohibit non-resident parking, overnight parking on Larch Lane. So I did write a letter back to each of the individuals that live on Larch Lane, basically advising them that the board has the ability to prohibit parking on any street. However, unless we're going to do something like they do in the borough of Westchester and stuff, you can't do resident. So that the board could, if they wanted to, prohibit overnight parking. We have to adopt an ordinance. There's a whole process.
That'd be good.
But that would mean is that nobody can park over, the residents included cannot park overnight on Larch Lane. And that's where we are tonight. Some are here.
I'm supportive of that concept. I'd like to hear from John and a couple of the other residents what their thoughts are on that as a possibility. Once the board discusses it, there's a further discussion.
Okay.
You go first.
Well,
Somebody's gonna comment.
Okay.
I actually have a couple of comments and I wanted to just I wanted to let you know, so actually John Herzog and I did go out and we looked at the situation. And I did call, I was able to get a hold of a resident who talked to me about this situation. And I asked, is this an ongoing issue on a daily basis, a weekly basis? Is it monthly? So this resident told me that it's happening probably 2 times a month. And it usually is on a Friday or Saturday night. And while there is some concern when there's overnight parking on both sides of the street, because the street is about 20 feet wide. And because we took my handy dandy measurement tool, and we saw that, if there were 2 cars parked closely on either side of the street, it would be difficult for any kind of emergency vehicle to get through. Mm-hmm. So my concern is that, emergency vehicles do need to get through day or night. I really hesitate to want to have us put up a no parking on the side of the street sign. It sounds like a number of the residents, actually this one particular person said that a number of the residents had talked and said that they really don't want a sign on their street. And then I asked if there had been any discussion with anybody from the township with the homeowners on 600 Reservoir Road. And apparently there had been some discussion, but I understand that there are issues regarding the percolation of his particular lot. It doesn't percolate very well, so it doesn't drain very nicely, and so it's difficult for him to widen his driveway. And it would require stormwater runoff plan and an engineering plan and whatnot. So it's quite prohibitive cost-wise to actually even go through the planning of that. So I'm wondering, is it possible, I don't know what kind of situation you all have with that particular neighbor, but I was wondering if perhaps the first person, and it sounds like it's only like 1 to 3 cars that actually stay overnight is what I was told. That was what was
Sometimes
reported.
5. Yeah.
Okay, so 1 to 5. So the fact is that we've got vehicles that are parking on that one side. Is that acceptable? And maybe the first person who arrives at the party chooses the side of the street. But I really hesitate to go further than just having, I don't know if that's even something we can possibly, it's not enforceable, of course, but I don't know if it's something that the homeowner would even be willing to work with the large lane folks regarding.
I wrote her a letter, Michelle.
But
We
it
wrote her
is,
a letter.
it is a public street. And so what we do to one, we might have to consider for another one in the future too. So I'm a little concerned about how we proceed on this.
Let me ask a question if I may. Rick, what Michelle is suggesting is that a compromise might be to permit parking on one side of large and not on the other side, or to bid parking on one side. How hard is that to do for you and public works people?
Well, in order to enforce an ordinance, in order to put up a sign, we'd have to have an ordinance. And we could, and the board has power to prohibit parking, no parking aside. We could do that.
We did that with School Lane last year.
No, we had that time, that actually went away, they got rid of the,
But we can do that, we can.
the board can prohibit parking on one side, prohibit parking on one
You can
side.
put the sign on my property, no parking out overnight, that'd be fine.
It's interesting. So when we were there, it looks like the north side of the street would be the most reasonable one to prohibit parking because there would be less linear feet to park on that side because of the type of cul-de-sac type of, not cul-de-sac, but the type of C-shaped, U-shaped driveways that happen to break up that piece of property, those two properties.
Let me make one comment. I know where we're talking about, I've been there, I didn't talk to the residents like Michelle did, but the petition clearly states that they're looking to eliminate all nighttime parking for non-residents. Now, that's what we were asked to look at. Now, the question becomes, and I appreciate what Michelle did, because we have done this before in circumstances where streets are narrow or whatever, where you have parking on one side or where there's abuse of the parking regulations. So that's not really a problem. My concern is if those that sign the petition are thinking that we here are talking about whether this is applicable to non-residents or all residents, because what Rick is saying is you cannot discriminate, but we can be on one side versus the other side.
It should be.
So I have no problem with that. I would think that it would be, if we put it on the agenda to talk about or make a decision as to what to do, you may want to get some of your friends in here so we have a better understanding of what they would prefer.
They're all aware of this. We spoke to them, and overnight parking would be good for everybody.
We sent a letter to all
Also on the list.
everybody's on all the residents, basically advising that the board can prohibit parking, but they can't make it, limited to non-residents.
Right, so the question becomes now, can all the residents or majority of residents live with just parking on one side?
None at all. No
No
overnight
parking.
parking, no overnight parking for nobody.
Either side.
Either
no
side, no
parking.
overnight parking would be better for, because the street's narrow, especially she said.
You gotta come up here because we got the problem with.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Wait a minute, time.
John Pizzo again. On the south side, when they come around the corner, that's the one that's where the cars are parked.
Right.
And that's where it's bad to come around. She said the north side, but the south side is worse than the north side. Because you can't park on the north side because there's driveway there. You follow me? There's a space as you come around and then the cars are parked. And as the residents come up the street, it's dark. You can't see the cars till you get around the bend. Either that or put our lights up, put some lights up for us. That's more feasible. I think the sign's cheaper.
that putting the lights up is a serious issue in this
We're
town.
not even going there. We're
Okay,
not.
we'll let Christina say something. Alicia, you done?
Christina Morley, 1530 Allison Drive. I'm just thinking of this. I realize I don't live in your neighborhood and I'm not experiencing this problem, but I'm just thinking for a future homeowner who moves into this street where parking is prohibited for overnight guests. If I've now purchased a property on your street and I move there and my sister comes up from Virginia and wants to park on the street, I think that this is not in the best interest of me. I think that this is a long-term permanent solution to a short-term problem. And so I'm just wondering if maybe there is another solution that could be reached that doesn't affect future property owners in East Goshen Township who will or may move onto your very nice street. And I'm not trying to devalue the problem that you're experiencing because I'm certain that it's very uncomfortable to deal with, but I'm just wondering how it might affect future property owners who move into Larch Lane.
That's a good point. Let me ask a question of John, if I may.
Yes.
John?
Yes,
John and John.
Yes, John.
What you're saying is you want it prohibited on both sides of the street overnight.
Overnight.
Well, how about in the daytime?
You can park during the day.
If there are two cars parked on either
Or you
side,
put it on one side if you want, whatever you do that way.
if there are two cars parked on either side of Larch, day or night, you're gonna have trouble
But you
with
can see during the day,
vehicles.
today, the visibility's better during the day. Correct?
I don't understand
Not
that.
true, not true. May I speak on this part? I take on Reservoir a lot, more than you can imagine. I know exactly what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, I know that house. They do have roughly, on average, about 4 cars sitting in that driveway, and they do park it in the front lawn, they park it in the side lawn. I understand their problems too with the water, cars sink down in the mud. Matter of fact, I think most of the cars are Subarus.
The driveway is very long. You can put more cars in.
They could, I see those guys, I see them a lot. They do things with their cars and they meet outside. One concern my wife and I have a couple of times now, going up Strasburg Road, when you have cars sitting on both sides, I've seen people come up your street, almost hit us. They come out and they have to really come out to take a look to see what's coming on.
Are you from,
Yes.
are you from the Larch?
I'm talking about the people in Larch Lane.
Coming out on
Yeah,
the
we
reservoir?
can't stand the people in Larch Lane. I want to yeah. No. I'm saying is I agree with 100% that is a problem. And I do know the people who live there, I don't know them personally, but I do see, especially during the summer, they have a lot of cars sitting out there. And, but they have nowhere to park. They really can't park on their property. I guess they have a long driveway, but when they have 3 cars in the driveway, they still park cars up in the grass and stuff.
They don't use, they don't park much on the driveway really. There's a lot of space left.
Well,
See, like
from what
they
I've
just
seen.
said there about people in the future. Don't we want to keep it to be nice and open, or do we want it to look like fall off? Because that's what it's going to look like. If everybody starts not using their driveway.
No,
It's
I'm
gonna-
just
it's
saying,
gonna
I
look
agree
like-
that you have at least one lane, maybe have one side that is prohibited and the other side that's, timed, whatever. So.
We really start putting out chairs in their parking places.
They do it without knowing.
Really?
I suggest, I make this suggestion.
What's that one?
That is,
I know.
that you folks down there see Rick or John or somebody or a little group of them here in the township and decide what is the thing to do, recognizing the inputs that you got this evening.
Right.
And then the staff will make a recommendation to the board and you can bring your troops over here and plead for that. That's the way, because we're not gonna be able to decide anything tonight. So rather than take a lot of more time, the thing to do is to work something out with staff that makes sense, long and short term, and then bring it to the board's attention.
What makes this place beautiful is the fact that you'll see a lot of cars parked all over.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I've been down
Unless you
there.
want it to look
I
like
know
fall
right
off,
where you're
that's what
talking
we're
about.
going.
Yeah.
That's what we're
But
going.
the solution is going to be
See,
between the
wrong about
residents.
property values. I don't want property values. When you people have driveways, why do they have to park on the street? I don't get it. You got garages in driveway, why do people have to jam up the streets? It's
Well, if you were in this job, you wonder why a lot of people do a lot of things.
Yeah, I know.
If you were in Harrisburg, where Dan was, you wonder more why people.
That's why you have driveways and garages.
It's one of those things that people do what people do, and we have to deal with it. So in this particular case, I think the thing to do is to work with staff, get something put together, let them come to us, and then if you're in agreement with that as a group, then it seems to me that's going to be the solution.
Okay.
And it shouldn't take forever.
You like to say something?
Yes.
Oh, you like to talk?
Just 2
Oh,
seconds.
good. Get real
My
close.
name is Valerie Clemens. I live at 1404 Larch, right next to John, his neighbor.
Is she a good neighbor, John?
Yeah, very best.
I've been there 30 years.
And I'm at 50.
Anyway, I don't know what the answer is, as you say, work together, but it's dark, it's scary. I don't know who these people are. It's a freaky thing when you come around, there's a car and you almost hit it. I get tired of it, you know? I live alone. It's very scary when you come around the corner. So that's it.
All right, that's all.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
As a supervisor, I think there's two things that need to be considered. One thing is the visibility issue at night, and the second thing is emergency services vehicles. And those are the two things that we could talk about, whether you like cars parked on the street or not. You know, we can't.
It's not liking, Dave, it's the
Yeah,
fact that they're a hazard.
So it just seems to me that cars parked on both sides is a problem because of the width of the street, and emergency vehicles, and visibility. So let's talk some more about that going forward, but just give you a perspective. It can't be, I don't like cars parked on.
No, it's not for that reason.
I have the same issue on my street coming around the corner on Bill Race Lane, cars parked, you know, on the streets, and you just have to be careful coming around the corner. So, but I appreciate that.
We have another problem. When they have construction done, they get the equipment, they make whatever they're working on, they bring the heavy, they park all the trailers on the street, and then they bring their heavy equipment with all the dirt on it up the street. I gotta go out and tell them, because we gotta bring it in our driveway. I mean, there's no consideration. When they could dump off the heavy equipment where they're working and then bring the truck on the street and then go back and pick it up instead of bring all the mud through the street. It's really.
Normally you can talk to contractors. We
I
just
did
had
talk
an
to them,
issue.
they do it for me, but.
We had
Should the
Chico in our
homeowner,
neighborhood
city,
for
help them?
about 6 months. And they came to homeowners association, we sat down and we gave them a parking area, lay down lot area where they could work from, and they were amenable
There's
to
no
that.
problem, no problem in parking, but they take the dirty equipment instead of bringing the equipment there first, you know what I'm saying? And then go pick it up with the trailer, they bring it on the street onto the trailer, and it makes a mess.
Let's do what I suggested and see if we get
I mean,
this.
it's a beautiful
resolved.
township, do we wanna keep it beautiful, that's the question.
All right, that's a good suggestion, Marty. Maybe we
Dan,
can have it on the
I
agenda
can
for
tell
next
you that
month.
Dan has a group of people, he
Alright.
definitely wants to keep it perfect, as we are already. So with that
You gotta
said,
work it.
Ricky's the point person, if he wants to sign somebody else, that's fine.
Let's see what we
With
can do.
that, I'm going to
Thank
go
you,
back
Mr.
to the
Thank you,
agenda,
David. Thank you, Marty.
and you're welcome to stay, John, and welcome to go home. If you hurry up, you can see some of the basketball games.
You're gonna start.
The chairman's report is number 7, if you got an agenda. And I just need to announce that the board met in executive session tonight to discuss a personnel matter. And that will come up later in the meeting with respect to that. Some people realize that each year usually the first Saturday, we had an annual planning session here to see what the various ABCs accomplished this past year and what their plans are, their goals are for the coming year. As time went by, we had less and less folks showing up on Saturday morning, which is somewhat obvious because they have things to do. So on January 28th, here at 6 o'clock, we have asked them what they would prefer. So we're going to try that evening. So if people are interested in finding out not only what we're involved in, but what the other ABCs are involved in, you're welcome to come here on the 28th at 6 o'clock. And that's when the planning session will be held.
For the records, ABCs are agencies, boards, commissions, and committees, so it's all of our.
You learned that in 1 year.
Advisory.
We're appointed.
Or advisory,
You're
appointed
appointed
boards and commissions.
committees.
Those are the guys that volunteer for our township.
The other thing too, and number 7C is, if anybody would like to be a tax collector, we're looking for one. The pay is really good.
Does the
I
tax
warn
collector
you, I
do
warn
what?
you that you will not get rich.
What does the tax collector do? What does the tax collector in East Goshen do?
Nothing.
There you go.
Which is probably be about the same as the tax collector does in East Bradford.
It's great on your resume if you want something that looks good that you don't have to do anything with.
The other thing, a week from tonight, there will be a meeting here with primarily Bowtree. We have 6 ponds, and a year or so ago, we decided it was time to bring each of them up to where they should be. All of them, there's different degrees of problems. We've done the Mary Dell one, and we're moving over to the first of the 3 Bowtree ponds, starting pretty soon. This meeting is for their benefit, so that they know what's happening and what the expectation is when we're all said and done. And that meeting will be here next Tuesday evening at, we meet at 7 o'clock? And we do have a pond committee. They are the ones that are meeting. It's not necessary to supervise.
It's not a committee. It's not a committee.
So,
Wait, time out. Is it a board of supervisors? It can't be a pond committee meeting because there's no pond committee that has any relevance to, pond committee. It's a pond meeting.
it's a meeting regarding the
It's a
pond.
public meeting.
I think it's a supervisor's meeting, correct?
I think it's a
But it's
supervisor.
not a committee meeting. Not yet, anyway.
It's a super, well, they don't have to.
It might be a committee after we get done the meeting.
Yeah.
Shows up meeting.
Just as a matter of interest to me, how many, besides myself, how many of the board members are planning to be here next Tuesday? You, John? Well, at least there's 3, 4. Yeah. Mike is one of those, they have to work. Mike has to go to work. It's just Tuesday night when he goes to work. So we will be here, and anybody that wants to realize or see what's going on with the ponds is welcome to join us. 7E, some know that there was a effort to look at the intersection at King Road and 352 and King Road to see what could be done about it. It was kind of an East Wetland project, although we have some degree of input into it because a portion of the road is ours. They have elected not to do it, not to move forward for a number of different reasons. And therefore the project is dead for the time being. This is the second time that has happened. For those that know that intersection, that's the one that's kind of got the weird layout. And the left turn lanes are really difficult if you're not familiar with what goes on there. As a matter of fact, even if you are familiar with it, it's difficult, but it's a very interesting and challenging intersection. But unfortunately, our neighbors did not want to pursue it any further, so we have to drop it. That takes us through the chairman's report. Let me just cross these things off so I don't get confused, which is easy for you to do. Is there anybody here that has comments on a non-agenda item before we start into? Please come on up. Announce your name and address. Thank you. And you gotta get pretty close to the mic.
Frank Morgan, 1704 Clock Tower Drive. My question is really a question. We've had the people doing the work on the lines. My question is, are they paying earned income tax? Is Keystone collecting that?
No, that's a good question, actually. It's my understanding that the situs that they have, so in tax policy, there's a concept of situs, like literally where you're situated. The situs is at the yard in East Whiteland Township. So ironically, East Whiteland benefits from the earned income tax, despite the fact that they don't actually have a pipeline going through, or well, they have pipelines, but not this Sunoco pipeline project going through there.
My point is, though, that the men are actually working in East Goshen Township.
No, yeah, we've been through this, but again, there's no situs. So there's the critical concept in taxation that you have to have. So if you don't pay your taxes, there has to be some tangible property that they can take. There's no fixed property that Keystone Collections Group, for example, could seize in the event for non-payment. So that's why it has to be at like the yard in East Whiteland where they had fixed equipment there. Does that make sense?
it does make sense, but, you know,
Not fair.
no, it's not fair, but I think about when you get the football players coming into town, there's, you know, they get taxed, baseball players get taxed, and there's no tangible.
You would have the same problem with the mailman, the UPS guy, the trash collector. And then, because this question it came up in the past, and we had a lot of development when the carpenters would come in and they built Bow Tree or Clock Tower. You know, the people that were actually working, where did they pay their taxes to? It goes back to where their company was based. But unfortunately, John's right. It's a state law, and we're stuck with it.
It just seems a shame that we lost probably $10,000-$20,000 over the past 2 years.
You contact your, as they say, write your congressman.
I will.
Yeah.
I'm meeting with one.
Representative or senator, yes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Good question.
If you're looking for the state representative, I would suggest you go over to the lady there that's sitting in the next to the last row along the aisle who works for her.
Okay.
And I'm sure that she'd be happy to take notes back.
And she's a lovely person, and her last name
Really
is
lovely.
Loving. So you can't beat that.
Oh, we got somebody else that's now challenging us. Uh-oh.
No, somebody's saying love.
Hi, how are you? I'm Lauren Stoltzfus. I live at 435 Gateswood Drive. I wanted to come to talk to you about my experience on Saturday with the pipeline incident that occurred. Unfortunately, I was home at the time, and it is directly behind my home. I was home with my husband and my 2 children who are 4 and 6. I thought a plane was landing on my home. I don't know if anybody's ever had a jet plane land on their roof, but that's what it felt and sounded like. Our house was vibrating, the ground was vibrating. I ran outside because, I don't know, I looked around and then I immediately looked up thinking I would see this plane coming down. It was extremely scary. I understand that the township is not at fault for that. However, Sunoco needs to be at fault for that. My 6-year-old has had nightmares since then, is afraid to sleep in her own bed. We were in our basement because I called 911. Now, our escape plan, which we were given, was walk outside, lick your fingers, see which way the wind is blowing, and walk the opposite way. Do not use a car, do not use a cell phone. Well, at that point, I didn't know what was happening. I look out my backyard and I see what appeared to be almost like 2 huge flames coming from the pipeline, which I'm now assuming was gas. And in my panicked moment, I thought, we need to get into the basement and we need to call 911. So that's what we did. And as I'm dialing, I'm thinking, well, I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing and using my cell phone. But at this point, I don't know what. I guess what I'm asking is, 1, what is going to happen to Sunoco for not notifying the proper authorities, not notifying residents? Are they going to pay for my child's psychology bill? Are they going to come in the middle of the night and sleep with her? Because she's scared to death and now we're all losing sleep. Luckily, my 4-year-old didn't quite understand, but the 6-year-old, she's got it. So that's my first question. My second question is, I really feel, although the 911 dispatcher was very kind, he did not handle the situation appropriately because he told me to stay sheltered in my basement until I was cleared. Now, our escape plan is to get out, do not get in a car, and to run the opposite way of the wind. Yet I was being told by a 911 dispatcher to stay sheltered in my basement until I'm cleared, trying to tell my children that everything's going to be okay. Meanwhile, my voice is shaking because I'm scared. And I kept saying, are you sure we don't need to evacuate? Do I need to leave? Should I leave my house? And my husband saying, we need to leave. And I'm like, but he's telling me to stay. And here we are in our playhouse in the corner of the basement where there are no windows. We can still hear the noise and feel the vibration. We were in our basement for 25 minutes. Not one person knocked on my door. I never received a phone call back from anybody saying it was clear. So we're just waiting and wondering.
I really appreciate your comments. And number 1, I've asked the township staff to contact the contractor, Michaels, and Sunoco for a full explanation of what happened. I want to know why the township was not notified. What they were doing is pressure testing pipe. And normally when they pressure test these pipes, they notify us. We post it on Constant Contact, the website. We let people know, hey, in your area, you're going to hear this hissing noise. Ironically, in their testimony and in their warning documents, they've told us that one of the indications that there's a leaky pipe is a loud hissing noise. So if they're if they're pressure testing a pipe and there's a loud hissing noise and they don't tell us they're doing it and we can't warn our citizens that they're doing it, then they're culpable for either stupidity or arrogance. And it really angers me. So I want a full explanation of what happened, why it happened. I want assurances that it won't happen again, number one. Number two, your second point, you are a litmus test of what happens in this township if a pipeline leaks and how citizens don't know what to do because Sunoco refuses to give us information and work with us to work out an evacuation plan. So, you know, it's unfortunate that emergency services, you know, probably shelter in place until cleared.
Who cleared me? No one cleared me.
Yeah, exactly. And then
That's wrong.
So why I say you're a litmus test, and it's a great example of we ought to do, and I'm going to ask emergency services to look at this. And I've attended tabletop exercises on response to pipeline emergencies. They need to make sure that their dispatchers and people that are receiving those calls are trained properly and that there's proper follow-up with the person who called. And there were a number of calls, I believe. So,
I could hear in the background.
Yeah,
I could hear through the dispatcher.
I'm as appalled as you are, and I'm sorry for what happened to your family.
But at your expense, unfortunately, you shared a very,
Here's your microphone.
regrettably, at your expense, very unfortunate situation, you shared a very germane element of what we've been trying to have involved. Christina Morley is on our pipeline task force. She knows very well this communication between this contractor that some of us like to call an invader and the relationship with our emergency services that we have faith in, we put our faith in, and the difficulty they're having getting information to provide a robust evacuation and other emergency response plans. We've been going through this for 2 years. We're going to be or more. We'll be sending another letter. And I think whatever letter we send, I think we ought to copy to the DEP so they're aware of it. And for a follow-up to see what kind of response they can provide. But we're going to continue to pursue this. And I don't know when we're ultimately going to get a resolution where somebody's going to come in and say, we had an incident, here's what happened. It was a great response. They got back. We're going to continue to pursue to see if we can finally get to that nexus, that point where we can say, good, at least we have a pipeline we don't want, but at least we know how to respond now. And we can all do it together.
Yeah, a couple of our people were involved, Rick being one of them. Let me have Rick share with you what he's found out and what's going to happen going forward, if anything. So, Rick, why don't you take whatever time you want and share whatever you know.
Well, as everybody said, they air tested the pipe. Historically, I guess they did one in November to let us know what was going on. We posted on our website to let the county Department of Emergency Service know, and we got that. For whatever reason, they didn't do that. And I've asked, my public works guy yelled at the guy on Sunday, called me, but why did they, why? They don't know. So we posted it. We got initial notice from the county, which we posted on our website. And then as additional information became available about exactly what was going on, we posted on our website. The question, and you raised a good question. The emergency guy on the phone at 911 center, you could have been the first call, so he doesn't know anything. All he knows is you called, you heard a loud hissing noise. And
That's not true. I explained what I saw, that the pipeline was directly behind my home. So,
but were you? I was saying, he just takes that information. He had based on what until somebody calls 911 and until somebody sends a police officer or a fire truck over there they don't have any information. All they know is that you called and reported this. And so in their defense, they're basically telling you, well, based on what we know, the best thing you can do right now is stay at home until somebody gets there and tells you what to do.
And that's understood. However, with this particular pipeline, that is the exact opposite of what we are told to do. And in fact, he even asked me, is everybody feeling well in your home? And I said, yes. And then he proceeded to ask me if we see or smell any gas.
Right.
Well, with this pipeline, you cannot see and you cannot smell.
Correct.
So until I pass out and then I become unconscious, and then I don't know if it's common to carbon monoxide, but my oxygen gets suffocated from this gas, and then I'm dead. So, and as a matter of fact, nobody who said they were going to come clear me, who knows how long I would have been in my basement with my children.
All I'm saying is
They need to be properly trained. So I'm asking, I guess, as a township, what can you do to ensure that these dispatchers are properly trained?
May I?
Is there, I don't know.
That's
just an ignorant question, I guess.
There's five pipelines on both sides of your neighborhood. You have 2 gas lines on the west side.
Yes, I'm aware.
And you have the 2 Sunoco pipelines underneath. You have the interstate energy pipeline. So again, he's asking questions to get information so he can advise the first responders or the emergency services get out there to know what to look for. So, and again, he asked questions. Can you smell the gas? If you had said yes, he may have given you a different response.
But I think what's worse is that I can't, or if I can't see or can't smell, then I should have
That is going to be.
I hear what you're saying, but they're not properly trained. So at what point, we could argue here back and forth, but at what point, or what can we do as a township to ensure that they are properly trained?
Let me respond if I may. Rick has worked with this for so long that I think it gets him a little red. He's on your side. He is definitely.
I've had conversations with Rick before. I don't know that he is, but.
And what I might suggest, I see Judy in the back and Christina here, members of the Pipeline Task Force. David is the liaison from the board to the task force. They have been working diligently, and Rick is at every meeting. Maybe you'd want to attend the meeting sometime.
I've been in contact with Melissa DiBernardino pretty frequently,
Yes.
And I've also been in contact with Christina, so they are aware of what happened, what we witnessed.
There's a meeting on Thursday at 5 p.m. here in the building. They might want to hear your firsthand account of what happened. We are quite sympathetic, but it's very difficult. I know Rick goes, and John too, goes back and forth with these pipeline people, and they are not responsive.
I just don't know what to do about that. I mean, I know that we can't make them do the right thing, but.
We're trying though, and the Pipeline Task Force has not given up on that.
If I might add, first of all, I think that it's not just your 6-year-old and your 4-year-old.
Absolutely not.
That experienced this, and I think that Sunoco has to realize that they have really done a lot of harm to a lot of small children. And I think that as a township, we need to tell them, hey, there are a lot of kids who are really having a difficult time right now sleeping because of this. I think they need to be told that. Do they want their kids to wake up with nightmares because of something like this? And
if
that's
they
really
cared, they
exciting.
wouldn't have done this from the beginning.
Exactly. So the
Whole
thing
different
is,
story,
I think that one of the things that we need to talk to maybe EMS 911 center, is it possible? I mean, I know that when they get a call, they have a map that pops up. Is there not an ability to put the pipelines, overlay the pipelines on that map so that they know this call is coming from near Mariner 1 or 2 or Adelphia or this one or that one? So is that something that actually pops up?
Yes, they have a capability.
So they have that capability. Do we know if they actually use that capability?
They have a script of questions that they ask that no matter what basically all any type of call.
But my question is specifically, when the map pops up and they see that there's a call coming from Lauren, do they have a map that shows the pipeline?
I understand they do, but.
So then they should, at that point, they go through their scripted questions, so they can
Right.
make sure if it's a natural gas line,
Right.
or if it's a propane, you might be able to smell, but I guess you can't smell the propane, can you? And you can. So they should be able to ask those questions.
That's why they asked that series of
Right.
questions, so that they can advise
Is it
the
the propane
emergency
line?
responders are going
Is it
out
the
there.
natural
Yes.
gas line?
Correct.
Is it you're not smelling or seeing anything?
And they
Then,
did that, which was great.
and that's
But they
fine.
advised me incorrectly, which is wrong.
That's the thing.
Let me share. I
I have a problem with
I
this.
understand why you feel the way you do and everything else. So anything I say, just take that into consideration. Rick and I are involved in a number of different organizations that have been dealing with this going back to the beginning of time, it seems, in our life. We have ourselves, the township has very little authority over anything that has to do with pipelines. However, the emergency services group has been for years been trying to get the information that they believe that they need to inform the emergency services personnel in the township and themselves as to what's going on. Rick described to you exactly what that fellow did. He thinking it was the best that he could offer you at the time, because what happens is, regardless of what you say, they don't know what happened until the first responder gets there. The first responders being the police, the fire, or whatever. They communicate back and tell them, which may change their script or whatever we're talking about. And that is a far improvement of what has been up until more recently, what's going on. There has been a fair amount of training, I should say more than a fair amount of training, for the folks over the 911 center. They've been trained, they have been trained to do exactly what that fellow did, even though you believe that it'd be wrong and maybe it was wrong. Because until they know exactly what it is, they're going to tell you to shelter in place, don't do anything, because they don't know what to tell you to do. So until they know, they can't really tell you anything to do, because they would be more wrong if they told you to do something that turns out to be cataclysmic.
And that's understood.
The point of the matter here is that Sunoco, even to this day, has not given them all the information that they would like to have so that they can provide the best potential service to the residents in a pipeline that really shouldn't be in this type of community. It is a very dangerous type of a pipeline. It has dangerous fuel mix in there. It has a lot of things going for it that shouldn't be, but it's here. So we have to live with it. Emergency services in the county is really a well-run, effective organization. They have worked hours on trying to get Sunoco, as we have, to try to get Sunoco to provide the information that they need to do the job properly. We are still working on it. We've made some progress. They have made some progress. And probably before the end of the time, which I still think is the end of the year, they will be done. Now, bear in mind, and there is no excuse for what happened. No, I don't care. Michael's is a contractor. They're very good, much better than the one who was here in the first place. But now either Sunoco didn't tell them what to do, or they didn't know what to do, because they are experienced contractors. They know that people have to know. They know if they test the pipeline, what's going to happen.
Which is my question is, was it really routine maintenance? With
Well-
traffic going down 352
well,
at the
you
exact
have to-
moment that happened?
Well,
I
they
doubt
say
it.
so. Now, now, everybody's skeptical of them, including myself. I don't know the answer to that.
Is an
I know
investigation
Ricky
being,
will still be pursuing this to get down to the point where we can communicate to all those like yourself that were directly affected as to what the heck went on, and why didn't we know, and all that goes with it. But I want to say that there's been a lot of time. Rick is a walking dictionary in pipeline, everything that has to do with pipelines. I would have to say he is more knowledgeable than anybody in the county, including emergency services, with respect to pipelines. He has made it a career out of learning about this particular pipeline. So he understands. In fact, I talked to him on Sunday, or it was a Sunday or Monday, sorry, I forget which day it was, that it said, what's going on? We got to get some communication out. There's others that were way ahead of me in talking to Rick, And we did the best we could to get information out, but we only know so much information. Now, David has sent an email to Rick that basically says, in a maybe not the nicest way, hey, wait a minute, these people are entitled to know what happened. Because they stole stories like you're telling, where children in particular are really screwed up because of this, let alone the mothers and the impact on the mothers, and to a degree the fathers, although the fathers look at it probably from a little bit different perspective, like, how do I get the family out of here? And sort of to make sure that they don't get hurt. So we have a ways to go to find out what we need to know, but we will eventually get as much as we're going to get. We meet periodically with Sunoco in an industry group, or county group, I should say. And this kind of stuff comes up all the time about why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Now, bear in mind, just the other day, Sunoco was released paying a $30 million fine for basically stuff that went on in the western part of the county. And they can now start all their piping process, including what's in West
Yes,
Whiteman.
I'm aware of that.
So unfortunately, they have their priorities. We have our priorities, which goes back to the beginning when we had Miko and we said, look, all we care about is you take care of our residents. Nothing else
But
matters.
it's been
to
very
us.
evident that they have not. So as a
Look,
township, what are you
in
doing
spades-
to
in
ensure that?
spades, You're absolutely correct. Now, we keep moving forward. And there are a number of people in this room that are also in different organizations working to get this thing resolved. It's not the easiest thing to do, to say the least, because we don't have a willing partner. I think personally that when they get that certificate of need back in the beginning, that enables them to go through the PUC, with the eminent domain process. I believe that they think that they can do anything that they want to do, and to hell with everybody else.
Well, I think they're already there.
Well, that's correct.
Um,
And they did a good job.
But if I could
with
just stop you, because I know about the pipeline, you're telling me information I already know, and I don't mean to be disrespectful.
Well, it's.
But I would like to just finish, because I feel like I'm just getting told the same thing over again, and I don't mean to be disrespectful.
That's all right.
But I've read the reports, I am well aware. Rick, you probably don't remember me, but a couple of years ago, we've been arguing back and forth about noise curtains. It's another thing on 352. They are not on our side, which they were a few years ago. So that noise was intensified because all of the noise bounces off the noise curtains on Boat Street and comes right over to us, just like all the traffic. So my kids don't really play outside much now because it's so loud. Also, not okay.
No.
For a 4 to 6 year old. And we have fought and fought and fought for those noise curtains again, and we still haven't gotten them. And at this point, we've just given up, and we just tell the kids, play out front, hopefully it's not too loud.
Well, I have a problem with the fact that Lauren should still be in her basement, and her
Yeah, nobody cleared me.
She still hasn't been cleared, and how do we find out who was supposed to clear her and her family, and how many others had called and actually were supposed to have sheltered in place and still haven't been informed that it's okay to come out now. And I have a problem with that. So I think that we need to look into figuring out who is the chain of command, who should have been contacting her. She called 911. I would think that the buck stops there, doesn't it? I think we deserve to get an answer for her. She needs to have some closure on this, as do all the other families that contended with this.
There's no doubt about that. And that's what Ricky's going to pursue. But we can't solve that problem right now because we're having the same problem and everybody's had along the way. That you get a little bit of information now, a little bit of information, and pretty soon you get the whole story. And that will come out eventually. But the question is, how long is it going to take? And so forth and so on. So I empathize, we all empathize with you, and it's not right. Nothing's right about this whole thing.
That's right.
And that's what it boils down to. And we're trying to make it right, but we're having a super difficulty trying to make it right. And that's all we can say. We just keep trying. And Rick keeps trying, I keep trying, and Dave keeps trying, and Mike keeps trying. We're all trying. But and we all got different things to do in different organizations. until we get the full cooperation of Sunoco, it ain't going nowhere, is what it really boils down to.
I think there are some things that we can do, and as I mentioned, I've asked for a full explanation, and to Michelle's point, it'd be nice to know what happened, why nobody was cleared after the 911 call. So we've got to get to the bottom of that as well. And those are the kinds of things we can do and we will do.
So dovetailing off of that, David, listening to all of this, I have 2 suggestions of actionable items that I think would address what Lauren was talking about. One was that even just tonight, I heard 2 different explanations of what the incident was. David, you mentioned that it was hydrostatic testing that was being done, and Rick mentioned it was air testing, air pressure testing. So that would be pneumatic testing.
I didn't say hydrostatic, I just said pressure testing.
No, you said hydrostatic. I wrote it down the moment that you said it.
You can watch the video. I did not say hydrostatic. I said pressure testing. So.
Okay.
The other thing I heard Lauren say though was, did you say, Lauren, that you saw a flame?
Yes. So I just want to talk about that for a minute.
Okay, because that was the other thing, and I that's all I heard. I didn't hear anything further about that, but that's.
Yes. So
I didn't think there was any fuel flowing through these.
Pressure testing would be one of 2 things. It's either going to be air testing, like Rick said, which would be the pneumatic testing, or it's going to be hydrostatic testing using water. And I don't know that either, and I don't know for certain, but from what I've been reading, I don't know that either one of those would result in the large flames that Lauren described. So based on that, and I don't know if anybody else is here to give eyewitness testimony tonight, but based on that, I would suggest that maybe in addition to asking, who were you going to ask for this information?
Well, that would be
We're
the
asking,
emergency services.
Okay.
We're asking Michaels and
Michaels and
Okay. So in addition to that, I was going to suggest that maybe you request that the PUC, Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, also do a proper investigation like they did in West Goshen,
So,
including the interviewing of eyewitness of witnesses.
I didn't hear anyone mention flames, and I also saw
I'm sorry.
recordings of 2 loud explosions, if you will, 2 loud popping, banging sounds.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to say, Lauren, and I wrote this down as she was speaking, she said she saw 2 huge flames coming from the pipeline. Is that not what she said? That is what she said.
I'm saying I saw only one report of that, and I heard loud popping, and I just like to know, I'm with you here. I'd like to know what that was all about. And by the way, as far as routine maintenance, that's the term they use every time they mess up.
Right, which is why I'm saying.
The 2 explosions up, an explosion up at the valve station on the other side of 202, that was routine maintenance also.
We get that too.
Yeah, we get the same
Right.
thing.
So I think that asking Sunoco is not going to be as effective as asking the PUC, Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, to do a proper test, and also asking that. So that would be one actionable item. And also I would suggest that if it's okay with Lauren, that she provide her information so that that could be passed on to PUC investigators, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you can provide some sort of a narrative, review of what you experienced, and writing that down more, that would be helpful.
The other thing is that I'll say that I was getting lots of notifications at the same time that this was happening concurrently. And I, against protocol of leaving the area immediately, went right over to the area, and I saw no emergency vehicles. I saw no police cars. I saw no fire trucks. I saw no actionable investigation going on at the time. So I am just making the assumption that maybe the investigation consisted of somebody going over there and saying on, and they said, oh, nothing, just routine maintenance.
The fire company responded with an engine and the chief going over there.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I as a witness didn't see anything.
Well, yes, I think let's start.
Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done yet. Second recommendation, is that we ask Chester County Department of Emergency Services to do a post-incident analysis of their own emergency response here, because I'm going to disagree with Rick and Marty in saying that this response was appropriate. If you read Sunoco's own recommended protocol, in a suspected incident leak, you are to leave the area immediately and then call 911 once you are at a safe distance. Even if we're going to talk about any of the other pipelines that are in the area, whether it's natural gas or whatever, and like you said, they're trying to discern, is this a natural gas one? Is this Sunoco? Even if you do smell natural gas, if we called today and we said we're at the township building, I think there's a natural gas leak, nobody is going to tell you to stay in this building. They are going to tell you to leave the building immediately. And then they will come evacuate. So the instruction to shelter in place and to stay in that building was incorrect, no matter which way you slice it or dice it.
I'm with you. Thank you. And your husband, Lauren, probably had the right idea to say, we need to get out of here. And then here you are being conflicted. You got your children who are just in a state of one particularly what's happening. That's a terrible circumstance to be in. Got to leave.
Okay, this event occurred around 3 o'clock, is that correct?
I believe I called at 3:11 or 3:12.
Right. I remember that day. Okay, I was on my property on my roof, moving my Christmas lights. Now, it's important to understand, has anybody there ever been to a truck drag racing contest? Or is a truck, they take a truck, they have a jet engine on this thing, and they pull as far down the field as possible. Yeah, you ever see one of those kick on? That's exactly what it sounded like. Now you actually heard it noise and thought, holy smokes, that's gonna be one hell of an engine. And now, where I live on Lockwood Lane, I thought at first it was the airport. So you mentioned about the plane, that's exactly what it did sound like. But it went, not just for maybe like a minute or something, it went on for a good 3 minutes.
Really?
It went on, and I could say myself, I was concerned, because I remember looking around my property and thought, my neighbor across the street, because he's got something in his garage, maybe he's got something pretty big in his garage because it's pretty close. And I don't live that close to that pipeline, I live pretty far away. But I will say, the police, I heard the fire department coming from 2 different directions within a good 20 minutes. Now, I can't give you exact timing, but the police and the fire department were called, they were on the spot. I will say, yes, it was loud. It was reminding me of one of those engines in the car.
All right,
So,
thanks,
truck.
Give Leo's information with these.
You can if you want. I mean, I remember that day very well.
Well, we have, first of all, Deb, we do have some things we're gonna follow up on. Rick or John, you got some notes. I think they're worth following to some of those different agencies and seeing what kind of report we can have, so we can try and learn from this. Okay. And Julia, you're hearing this, so you can certainly pass it on to Representative Camina to what we're hearing again today about, the disconnect and the concern and really the trauma, the PSTD that people are going through in the neighborhood, in our neighborhoods.
Sorry for getting up again, and I don't intend to disagree with you, Rick, but I was hoping you could verify something you said earlier. You mentioned that the propane would have an aroma. I personally software down to Philadelphia refinery that puts the mercaptan into the propane that gives it a smell. So I don't think the propane coming through the pipe in our township has any of that in it, because it gets added down there in Marcus Hook. It's important to know, because if there's propane,
I know that for a fact, it does not have
it doesn't have any mercaptan, so we wouldn't smell propane either.
And it's never added either because it's being shipped.
Depends where it goes. Yeah, I wrote the software that does it, so that's how I know. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure, clarify that, because I was a little concerned. She said that, they understood their procedure to be go outside, find out what direction the wind is blowing. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I live 750 feet away from it. Hasn't been communicated to me, but thankfully I've worked in these places, so I have some idea, but I don't think my neighbors know. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Judy's going to get her assignment. That's it.
Okay.
We're going to have to move away to that other stuff.
Sorry, we really appreciate you
Judy
sharing.
DeFonso, who's also on the pipeline.
Talk to Rick, you share a narrative with him, at least so he has it, that's great. And if you don't have time, we understand it too, we still have things to follow up
Judy DeFonso, 462 Gateswood Drive. Another different sort of pipeline issue that I ran into today. We're having our water mains replaced by Aqua, and I know my next door neighbor actually had a water main leak, so I know that they're probably at a point in their lifespan where they do need this sort of service. I pulled out onto the street and it's hard to see. And then when I did look, there's strobe lights. I get migraines, and strobe lights are a trigger. And I'm just wondering if we can do something about strobe lights. I've actually talked to Carolyn Committa's office, and apparently that's not something that they have heard a lot of input on, but strobe lights are a migraine trigger for some people. They're also a seizure trigger for certain epileptics. And the last thing I need is I'm driving my sons to the dentist is to have a migraine, because I have to look both ways exiting my driveway in order to be safe driving down the road. I'm noticing more and more strobe lights. The school buses all have them on the top. The red lights as they flash are strobes. The flashing light on 352 going north of Paley Pike was actually strobing for a little bit. It's better now. It's now flashing.
I thought it was failing when I saw that.
I mean, it has to do with the frequency of the flash, whether it's a trigger or not.
Yeah.
Just about every municipal vehicle has a strobe light on it. There's strobe lights on Henkin vehicles that service New Kent and then drive out to their other locations. Just about every construction vehicle has it. Main Street in Exton has it on their red lights. They're hard to avoid. The way station, there's 4 of them at the way station. If it's in use. If it's not in use, there's no lights. I tend to not drive up Route 100 simply because of all the strobe lights on Route 100. I'll take the back roads. It takes me a little longer, but I don't end up with a headache at my destination. I'm not sure what you can do about it with the construction that's going on with Aqua. I'm planning on giving them a call and asking them if they give me a reasonable accommodation under ADA and ask them to not use them. I mean, I realize it's a safety issue, but Gateswood Drive is kind of there's not a lot of traffic, especially in the cul-de-sac. This vehicle was in the cul-de-sac that had the strobe light on it. But the other thing too that you guys said earlier is there's that meeting that you guys have out with all the townships. And I'd be wondering if this is something that talk to the other townships about. Do you have citizens complaining about the strobe lights? I mean, police, fire, any kind of emergency vehicle has
That's the
them.
first I've heard of it, Judy, at the municipal level. I've heard studies in the past and responses to strobe lights affecting those who are prone to seizures and epilepsy. It's a very broad issue. I'm looking at Julia because now I'm looking at my state legislature for some response, because this is a major industry issue. Be ready for a long haul if you want to try and start to regulate that kind of stuff. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not trying to shortcut you or shortchange you, but that's a major issue that I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I appreciate you hearing from you tonight, but I don't think we're going to get too far on that tonight.
I believe that there may have been a state or two that has banned them.
Probably California.
Again, it has to do with the frequency. It's like, you know, well, it's just kind of strange where a flashing light is fine, but a strobing light isn't. And at some point, a flashing light becomes a strobing light, and you know.
So you would, I understand, because I also suffer from migraines, and when I have like an overhead light in my office at work, if it's been blinking, yeah, it does tend to make me go toward a migraine, and if I don't catch it quickly. I guess the question is, can we just, are you going to ask then Aqua to maybe back off the strobe and see if they can turn back
But
So
do they
it's
need
more
to use,
flashing?
do they need to use strobe lights on their vehicles as they're parked
As
on the street?
So perhaps they will still need to have a flashing light. It might be a requirement for their insurance company, but perhaps you can request that if it's possible to back off the strobe and make it more of a flash.
And this light was actually not on an Aqua vehicle, it was on one of their subcontractor vehicles. So I mean, again, it definitely is gonna be something that's gonna be
That
hard
would be worth
to.
an ask when you talk to them, but I don't know if it's something that our township vehicles have the ability to change or not. It would be a Mark Miller question, I suppose.
Well, we have strobe lights on our vehicles, so the police department, my understanding with the traffic signals is that the traffic signals are specifically signals are timed not to at least my understanding, to trigger the thing with the,
With migraines and seizures,
Yeah.
right?
And just for the record, Mark Miller just indicated he said, I will handle tomorrow about
well, they can talk
Oh, look
about
at that.
All right.
And also that light on 352, it had electrical problems a couple weeks ago, it's been fixed, so that's.
Yeah, I did notice that thing changed, but to say, I'm just afraid to look at the red lights. It really, and the way station, I'm not sure about, because the way station's got a lot of them there, so. Well, thanks for listening.
All right. Oh, we learned something. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Okay.
Well, that was a short public comment period, I must say.
You had,
It's amazing the number, amazing the problems that people have in attention, but we'll try to get to the bottom of that, particularly situation happened over the weekend. Because I can assure you that David's not gonna let it go, we won't let it go, and hopefully we'll get an answer. Emergency services themselves have been very cooperative. We should find something else. Okay, moving right along, we're down to item number 9, which is the police reports.
Can we forego that tonight unless there are specific
Unless-
questions?
unless
They're available on the webpage.
Beautiful.
That's done.
That's the way we do it, these Brad.
That's good, Jeff. That's good, Rick. The financial report, John, why are you doing November?
No, well, just because we didn't get to it last time, I'm gonna skip over it and just get to the punchline, which is what you guys want to know. Which is the general fund finished, and this is unaudited, there's still a couple of transactions we need to clean up, but it's gonna finish the year around $55,000 deficit. So.
That's a lot better than one.
Yeah.
A lot better.
That's beautiful, John. Thank you very much. You guys are giving up all the time. Share your time, but you're going to fierce that I can get stuff out of the book here.
Minutes and,
The minutes and we gotta do the minutes, we gotta do the financials.
yeah, we got 2 packages.
So, I have read these, I read them in the context that I normally read them. We lost our minute editor. I will assume that responsibility, and Mike is gonna assume it on the money side. So we'll get it back in minutes, but I didn't notice anything that should be amended in the ordinance in the minutes. Did you? Anybody else?
No, I saw that.
With that, I assume the minutes should be approved as, minutes are approved as prepared.
Are we just doing a general?
That was my motion. You second it?
I'll second it.
Anybody up here have any comments or questions out there? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, as far as the money is concerned, Mike, did you look at it?
I looked at, and John and Michelle, you may have had a chance, this is a routine, every time we meet, staff through John Alshaw is gonna prepare a list of, payment vouchers for the various funds. And they provide a substantial amount of detail, but you may look at one of the codes and see an explanation and say, well, what is this one or that? And occasionally we'll ask those questions. Of the 2 packs that I saw, went through, I had a couple little check marks, but there was nothing that got my attention. I think they're in order. So I'm comfortable with them, but I'm interested to hear anybody's comments or, again, John and Michelle, you're seeing a lot of these vendors and expenses for the first time. I know I asked various questions in the beginning, and John is certainly willing and able to answer any number of questions on it.
I would just observe one thing, there is, through the bond fund, there is a payment for the the West Goshen wastewater treatment plant phase 2 project, which is substantial, $1.6 million.
Yes.
That is what I am sort of proposing is technically, bond fund is technically under the auspices of the Board of Supervisors, obviously, but the municipal authority obviously has sort of more technical expertise. So before we send payment of that check, I want to run it past the municipal authority as well. That's for the COMAG system to bring the phosphorus levels down to DEP levels, as well as improve dewatering processes at the West Goshen site.
Just so you folks know that what we're talking about up here, that we get each month, is one of the ways that we keep track of everything and make sure that we're on what we thought, the route that we thought we were heading down on. And if not, we ask John, why is it something different than we thought it was going to be? So it's just another one of the triggers that we have to keep track of everything. Is there a?
Yeah, no, we haven't. I'd make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we accept the receipts as they've been presented and authorize the approval of the expenditures as presented in the 2 packets of expenditure registers we've received and summarized, and that authorize those for our signature on later this evening.
No, second.
Comments from the board? Anybody out there? Whoa, Dan, you chased everybody away.
All right, thank
All those
you.
in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Old business is, the first is, we gotta acknowledge the receipt of the common pleas court decision regarding the Malvern Institute. We have probably all read this, it's pretty extensive. Rick, I'll ask you to give about a 2.5-minute summary.
Essentially, the court ruled that the zoning hearing board needs to go back and hold a hearing, come back with a findings and decision that essentially allows the institute to expand. There's an appeal date of January 9th, so we'll have to see what, if somebody files an appeal.
This is kind of rather a big deal. It's been going on for, it seems like forever. John Snyder is on our zoning hearing board. He's very knowledgeable and wrote the original decision and kind of got lambasted in the response from the, but nonetheless, they got to this, the end of the day, they kind of got to the same point. This has to do with a doctrine of national expansion, and I am not going to attempt to explain that, which is one of the reasons that we did not take a position in this, except ask for a number of things to be included in the decision that would protect the residents going forward. So it looks like Malvern is going to get what they wanted to get. We hope that we just get the conditions that we wanted to impose when they're all said and done, and I think we are. So right now, we have survived. Malvern has to do more work before they survive, but in the end of the day, I think that they will. But if anybody's interested in reading cases, try to get that sort of website, right?
Yes.
And it's an interesting thing to read, but it's fairly lengthy.
And if you do want to learn about the doctrine of expansion as far as land use and law, just Google doctrine of natural expansion and you'll get case studies and you'll get the gist of how a business has certain rights to keep its business viable that may expand upon what is currently permissible under the zoning ordinance.
It's got to be pointed
that's the
out,
gist
we're
of it.
getting into the weeds here, but we're talking about a facility that's a non-conforming everything. And they end up with rights that are a little bit different than if you were a conforming situation. So you don't want to get, this is kind of like one of a kind, but it's very informative, it's very interesting if you're interested in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Next is, we gotta talk about skating on our ponds.
Yeah, and I'll go quickly. The township's long-term policy is that we do not allow ice skating on the 6 township ponds. Anecdotally, we've heard stories that neighborhood kids will go out there and skate. That was not really a big deal at the Marydale site when it was 18 inches deep. It didn't have an aerator installed 8 feet deep in places. There's an aerator. The risk of a catastrophic injury is very high. And so Public Works has already gone ahead and installed those skating and swimming signs, but the code does not explicitly prohibit ice skating. So just to be sort of extra safe and also so the police can tell kids to not skate. There's the park section of the code basically allows the park commission to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors that it can pass by resolution to change the park section of the ordinance without going through a formal public hearing. So basically this resolution attached would just clarify that skating is prohibited on township parks.
We're being
Township ponds.
recommended, John and Rick are recommending to us that we adopt resolution 2019-57, which prohibits ice skating and similar activities on the township ponds. I agree with that. Does anybody have a motion?
I move that we.
The chairman will put the motion on the floor.
Second.
Anybody else up here have any comments?
No, smart.
Anybody up there have any comments?
Sure.
I just have a question. While I agree with this, I just want to know, does the township have liability insurance enough that we can cover something catastrophic?
Well, it's interesting. So when I fill out the insurance application every year, I say we do not allow ice skating on ponds. I went back and actually spoke with our broker just to get clarification about whether there is an exclusion for ice skating in our policy, and there is not. So it actually is technically covered.
Okay,
But we have a $10 million umbrella. So.
Okay, and then the other question is, I assume that our EMS folks are trained in ice water rescue,
Oh,
aren't
yeah.
they? Okay. Right, that's fine. So I
Michelle, is pipelines what we're worried about?
I don't know, I'm worried about the ice too.
Insurance may provide for it, but we don't want to have to
Yeah, I wanna make
handle a tragedy with
No,
insurance.
it's good to know that the
Yeah.
EMS are trained in that, that's perfect.
They're
Fine.
all.
Just making sure.
Training.
Not to interfere with this, but speaking of you folks, we
need to
We need to vote on that.
We need to vote on that. We need to vote on the next one. Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for that, John.
David, you?
Aye.
Unanimous, John. The next is we got to consider recommendation regarding a notice of violation that was issued to Sunoco and the response from PennDOT, or not PennDOT, DED. Rick, you want to explain a little bit about what's going on without getting too much in the weeds?
So at the meeting on December 5th, the pipeline task force passed a motion to recommend that the supervisors write a letter to Sunoco asking them to confirm that they've complied with the information, asking them to confirm that they comply with DEP's requirements and to provide us with copies of the information. Obviously, the meeting was canceled, but lo and behold, I guess it was Friday, we get a letter from response to our letter that we wrote back in November to DEP. And so we got a letter from Harrisburg that essentially outlined that Sunoco has provided the information, and Sunoco is allowed to proceed with the drilling on 521, which is the bow tree down to the Catholic Church. I emailed back DEP, is the information publicly available and can we see it? I have not got a response. My guess is that this has to go back up to Harrisburg to get clearance whether or not we'll see the information. But I do know that there is an exemption in the right to know law and criminal investigations. The stuff is not public until they decide it's public. So right now we're waiting to see if there is a response. But I don't know if we want to send a letter to Sunoco, but it would seem that
If they want it, and Sunoco has provided it, we got to send a letter to Sunoco. If you want to consider the matter closed, then it's closed. If they're asking for something and we know that Sunoco has it and it's alleged that they provided it, then we should ask for it.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I agree. I'll be surprised if we get a response from Sunoco, or if we get a response that has substance to it. But
That's another whole question.
yeah, I hear. But yeah, let's do it.
the motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye. Thanks for that.
Mike can pick anybody you want for a second.
We all seconded this?
There's a lot of seconds in there.
Kind of like Jeopardy, is it?
We considered the parking regulations in March. We do have to deal with the ABC appointments. That was the personnel matter that we were discussing tonight, that you heard about earlier. And is there somebody that wants to make a motion with respect to what we know right now so we can get this thing rolling?
We have, let me just, before somebody makes a motion, let's just confirm. We are going to be looking to fill a vacancy on the Conservancy Board. We're looking to fill a vacancy on the Planning Commission. Is that correct, Marty?
We have two on the Conservancy Board, two on the Historical Board, one on the Planning Commission, one on the Pipeline Task Force, one on the Sustainability Committee, and one on as an alternate in the Zoning Area Board. And what we're doing.
I think we're doing one at a time.
With respect to this Conservancy appointment, Dan Flynn has been suggested that we appoint to the Conservancy Board. I think most of us took participated in the interview. With the exception of the two new folks, we were pretty impressed by him, and I think he would do a good job, and I would suggest that we appoint him.
I can support that one.
No second.
So we have to vote on that one then?
Yeah.
I'd like to do them individually.
Yeah,
Michelle,
I think it's
see
easier.
if we get through them tonight. We may not get through them all.
Okay.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
So that's Mr.
Unanimous with
Flynn,
Mr. Flynn for the Conservancy Board.
Okay.
Agnanelli, was the fellow that was recommended. He did a really good job in our interview. He's recommended for the Planning Commission. We had talked about that at the time. I would say that, in my opinion, that's a good fit.
I would agree with you. I thought he was a good candidate for the Planning Commission.
Did he have a
motion
preference?
to that effect, Mike?
Well, did he have a preference for
He
which board he wanted to be
expressed
on?
an interest in the zoning hearing board, but we talked to him about it, and he's not an attorney, and he had some of his background was effective for the Planning Commission, we thought, and that's why we thought he would be a good fit.
But notes yours indicate that he actually indicated that Conservancy was his
Conservancy
first
was one
preference.
preference.
He applied for the Planning Commission. When in the meeting, he came up and said he'd be.
This is what
He just wanted to be involved initially, and then we looked at his resume, asked some questions, and said, we think this could be a good fit for you.
This guy was really quite good.
He had a nice resume.
Is there a motion to appoint him?
I would make a motion, and if I can pronounce Michael Paganelli's name correctly, if you're listening, I'm sorry if I didn't get it correct, to serve on the Planning Commission.
You pronounce it, Dave?
Yeah, Paganelli.
Now, any comments or questions besides the audience out there, Dan?
What can you tell us about, you're proposing to put this individual on the Planning Commission? On the website, it shows two members of the
Don't
planning.
forget, there may be somebody out there just wasn't trying to listen to what you're saying.
Obviously, I have a lot of interest in what's going on in the Planning Commission. The website shows that there are two members of the Planning Commission whose terms are expiring at the end of 2019.
They're being reappointed.
When did that happen? We didn't get there yet.
You will get there.
Okay. And this third person then to fill the slot, I assume is Brad. It left.
Brad Greasy.
Okay.
Brad Greasy.
I mean, philosophically, does he just like the other four, or does he? What am I trying to say? Other than his background.
No, I had the background here. I don't want to point out because it's way back someplace that I can't find it. But he was very impressive. His background and his enthusiasm was very high. Now, somebody may have their stuff
This
out.
is enthusiasm.
I have his resume here.
I'll be very pointed in this question. Is this enthusiasm very high to pack more people into this township?
And we actually don't select candidates. For planning based on questions like that, we base it on their skill and their resume. We don't know. And that'll be determined when he gets on the board. It would be inappropriate for us to ask those kind of questions.
Why would it be inappropriate?
Because you don't ask people what their philosophy is and then choose against them based on their education and their preferences.
But if their philosophy is counter to the township's long-term plans, whether it be the comprehensive plan or whatever.
We talked to him about it, he's aware of the plans, he looked at the plans, his qualifications are strong, he's a good candidate.
Senior project.
Frankly, we don't know.
Is there a reason why these interviews aren't held in public?
It's the board's responsibility to interview people and make a
That's
recommendation.
exactly right.
We
Personnel.
talked about it, and I can tell you from my own experience under the sunshine law, the elected officials must be done in public, the others not. So that's why they're done under the sunshine law in executive session. Because the feeling is being, it's not fair to put people that aren't elected under the gun, so to speak, and this is the way you do it.
With personal details,
Now,
I agree.
You have every right to say whatever you want when we get out of here, because we don't make the decision back in the back room, we make the decision out here. David is correct. We don't ever ask anybody, never have, since in my 30-some years, ask people what their own particular inkling is. That's not right. They represent 18,000 plus people, so they may take a position A on this one and position B on the next one. I personally operate that way. I carefully view all sides of an issue, and then I decide what I think is best for East Goshen. That's the way I do it. Some people like it and some people don't.
In fact, you should compliment us on the fact that we don't know his position.
In fact,
I disagree.
One way or the other.
I know.
You pack the board and you don't. I mean, that's.
I know that you have strong feelings about certain things, and that's fine, and you're allowed to have that. However, we have never taken a position of asking anybody what their position is about this, that, or the other thing. When any.
Their overall qualifications, their interests, they've been resident of the township, they want to be involved. And we look at it from that perspective as a volunteer and wanting to do public service. And if their background has complements to the ABC vacancy, that's where we go from there. So I'm in agreement. I concur with that, with your comments, Marty. And I respect your comments, Dean.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. Just a quick question regarding ABCs. Do the individuals have to give financial statements?
No.
No? Okay.
They do.
Some
They
of them do.
Yearly, you have to.
Some, I think the authority members do. There's certain ones that do it. The authority members, I believe.
Because they
do.
get-
I think the
Zoning hearing board?
zoning hearing board definitely does it.
There's a list.
Yeah.
It was
The
the
elected officials, the zoning hearing board, if there was an active elected tax collector, they would have to provide their financial disclosure.
Municipal authority, don't they?
And municipal authority, I think those are the groupings where they are, the authority, of course, is unto itself, so they have a.
But Leo, to your question, I can assure you that in the interview process.
I'm not asking about the interview question.
We asked the question in the interview about conflicts of interest, so we don't.
Yeah, that's not my question, but I'm asking only because, I've already sent my application. I'm interested, so I'm just asking a question regarding, authorities, boards, commissions, committees. I'm assuming that committees and commissions do not have to give financial statements. Everything else does.
You need to read the ethics act codes that's spelled out in there.
Thank you.
You're not interested in, and which ones you're interested in.
Thank you.
And it takes care of that little problem.
Thank
The next one.
So did you?
Oh, we can vote on that.
A second. I made a motion.
Anybody up here, any more questions or out there? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
You guys, what are you doing that? I can't hear you.
Nay.
I said nay.
Okay,
Okay, so 4-1.
41? Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
Jim Ruggiero and Chuck Proctor were considered for the alternate in the zoning hearing board.
Alternate, that's important to state.
It is recommended that Jim Ruggiero gets it. I personally know both of them well, I think David does. I know that Jim Haber, which has nothing to do with the appointment, but at the same time, there was some of this is done at the end of last year, and which is a little bit difficult when you have the planning session now and people are talking about things in today's environment. It was a 3-2 vote, with Jim Ruggiero having the 3 votes. I would say that either one of them can certainly do the job. It's an alternate position. They do not get many things to talk about in a year, so you're not talking about somebody who's going to have great influence necessarily, but at the same time, it's a position that you want to make sure that the person that has it knows what the heck they're doing, and that's one of the reasons you get lawyers mostly applying for the zoning hearing board. So that's where we are. I have no problem with either one of them. I think they would be a fine alternate, and if they ever had an opportunity to do something, they would do it well. The decision of that group at the time was Ruggiero. That's all I can add to the whole thing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we appoint Jim Ruggiero as the alternate to the zoning hearing board. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any more comments up here? Anybody out there? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Nay.
Marty, you were an A?
Pardon me?
You were an A?
What?
You're in that.
I was in Nay the last time, it's still hard to
Oh,
change.
you start, okay, excuse me.
Yeah, and the last one, the Futures Committee is an interesting committee because it doesn't have a parameter about how many you can have. They only have, well, 3 now. Brian Sweet is asking to win that, and we think that he would be a good choice for the Futures Committee, which would make them 4. So I would strongly encourage the group to appoint, out there, although, I'm sorry, let's give a good pair of shoes.
Should have sat up front.
Sit up front, Leo.
Yeah, I work at home all day and I sit at the computer, so this is actually helpful. No, I'm sorry, my quick question is, how many members are on that board? Did I hear 4?
What?
Futures?
Futuristic committee?
4, there'll be 4 with them.
4.
As I was gonna share that it would be, to make that, the conversations that they have more robust, I think to have more members is a positive thing. In fact, David, you had stimulated me with a capsule summary of a futurist individual that was, you sent through the internet the other week, and we commented and exchanged my big ideas. And one of the things I came back with was, you know, what would be really interesting to either interview or have some youth members on the Futurist Committee. Someone, you know, there's some great students in middle school, high school, and college who already are starting to think about the big picture, and to hear their perspectives and translate them into what we see in our future. They could be talking about the way you chew gum, but it doesn't matter. It's their perspective. I would love to see some youth be engaged in the future, since we're such a unique committee. I think there's only one Futurist Committee in local government in Chester County. I'm not aware of any other among the 73 municipalities. It's a forward-thinking, it's a free exchange of information that sometimes takes a direction that passes on to the board. So the number coming back, I'd like to see more members on the Futurist Committee to have more robust exchanges.
I actually have 2 questions then. That committee has no voting of any sort, is that correct?
Well, they can review a particular item, and they can say, we would recommend to the board that they consider studying this particular issue more, possibly engaging a consultant or doing a survey, and they can make recommendations. That's what the advisory.
The reason I'm asking is I think that you would want an odd number as opposed to an even number. 4 versus 5, you have a tiebreaker. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, nothing has been that controversial, but it's always nice to have an odd number. Why in Lower Merion Township they have 12 commissioners? I have no idea.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, that's where we were. Except for the reappointments. And each of the folks that were up for reappointments want to be reappointed. Now, we've been asked, how do you deal with that if in fact somebody should be reappointed? Well, in fairness, it's happened once or twice, as far as I recall. It's generally taken care of before you reach this point, because it would be a little embarrassing in public to have to say somebody's not being reappointed. You talk to them and you tell them why, which is the only fair way of doing it. And in the cases, at least the one case that I know of for sure, it was very self-evident that it needed to be done, and the person didn't argue with it at all. If I recall, there's a second one, but I don't want to talk about it because I just don't recall enough about it, but I think there was a second one, and it was the same kind of a situation where the person just didn't fit, and with that group, and so forth and so on, and was not a contributor. So I would read off the people that have asked to be reappointed and where they represent. One of them is Eric Meyer. We all know our good friend Eric Meyer, who has asked to be reappointed, and we think he's deserving.
And thank you, Eric, for continuing to serve.
Bill Meyer has been appointed, has asked to be reconsidered
And they're
or
very
considered
solid.
for the municipal authority.
Yep.
They like for the Park and Rec Board,
Yep,
Joe
they're
Zelli for the
active
Park and Rec
participants.
Board,
Yep.
Bill Wegeman for the Task Force,
Joe's
Red Light
the-
Task Force,
Don't forget
Mark
Joe.
Levy for the Planning Commission, Dan Daly for the Planning Commission, Kip Happ for the Sustainability Commission, Jeff O'Donnell for the Sustainability Commission, and the Vacancy Board, Tom Clapper, the Vacancy Board, for those that don't know, is if there was somebody resigned of the board and the four that are left could not agree, Tom Clapper comes into play and he effectively makes the decision. Because the board consists of the four supervisors and that individual is going to determine who then becomes the supervisor.
And Marty, you overlooked Joe Zulli on the Park and Recreation.
I said.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Well, then maybe I need my ears checked. I mean.
Yeah, that's a motion.
That was a motion.
Is there a second? Somebody make a motion. Second.
We just did.
Good. Anybody out there have any comments or questions?
Yeah, you're about to pass all of those?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody is all.
Yeah, I mean, in reference to the planning commission. Well, I'm still a little disturbed that I don't think some of you got the message on December 17th, that this community is overwhelmingly opposed to what you're thinking of doing along the Paoli Pike corridor, overwhelmingly. But you know, the people that come out to these meetings are generally people who are opposed, right? And we filled this room up. And when you schedule another meeting, we're going to fill up a bigger room. The public is overwhelmingly opposed to this. And the reason why I'm interested in what's going on with the Planning Commission is I did attend a Planning Commission meeting, and my sense was that every single member of the Planning Commission was on board with the idea of including residences along the Paoli Pike corridor above the stores. So it's storefronts with 2 levels of apartments above it. It's the apartments above it is what has the public up in arms. Every member of that board seemed to be in favor of. It seems to me that you might want to consider changing up, and it's nothing against the 2 guys who happen to be up right now, but if you have a planning commission full of people who are all of exactly like mind, you don't have sufficient diversity of mindset on there. You need some people who think differently than the ones who are already there. So by reappointing these 2 guys.
Time out here. I mean, go ahead and finish, but.
Let me finish. Marty, let Dan finish.
By reappointing these 2 guys, you're ensuring that the output of the planning commission isn't going to change from what to more accurately reflect what the public thinks is the right thing to do here.
And I've attended these meetings over the last 2 years, and what you don't understand is that every one of the planning commission members have changed what they think about the plan. Given input from the public, given input from the consultants, given input from the board, they've all come to different conclusions at different times. They've all favored different things. I've been to all the meetings. So you're wrong in saying that they pre-decided what they were going to do 2 years ago and haven't changed, because they all have. And it's all part of the dialogue in those meetings. You can't tell that from a single meeting or 2 meetings or however many meetings you came to. So the point is that the board members have changed their minds on certain things. The plan would be impacted. So I think that you're not fairly characterizing these people. They're all thinking people. They're all smart people, and they're all people who listen. to input, and things have changed over the time. If you look at the ordinances over time, you'll see that they've changed. They've scaled back a lot. So that I don't agree with your characterization of the board members.
My point is just simply they all seem to think alike at this point, and changing 2 members out, or 3 members out might be a good idea so that you can somehow come up with a plan that's acceptable to the public. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan.
Anybody else? No other question? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I would like my vote to reflect that I am yay to all except for Mark Levy and Dan Daly, and I'm a nay.
As a tail end here, I'm new, I don't know everything, I realize that. I got 65 emails on my new computer, bought by East Goshen, on the TND. There was 1 in favor, and there were 64 against, people who took the time to write about it. I think that's a fact that we have to digest somehow.
And John,
Thank
John, I agree with you that we need some time to digest. As you know, I've copied everyone on the positive feedback on it, and I've suggested, and we as a board, a new board now configured, I've suggested we slow down a bit. Instead of having a large venue meeting where we don't have a chance to exchange ideas and it can become antagonistic and the exchanges become truncated and emotional, that we slow down, we move back into a couple of open house scenarios where we invite the public in a rolling period. There were a couple of open houses over the next couple of months, maybe February and March, where say from 5 to 8 o'clock, people can come in, meet with us directly, meet with our consultants, our staff, talk about this, help them understand the ordinance that we see. And I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it since we're now starting to parse this out, that the changes that have been made in this TND, and let me preface by saying the Goshenville Town Center and some of the aspects of creating a point, a destination point and a place of interest, I've had ambivalence on. But as I've looked at this ordinance and in the current form that it's in, with the potential for redevelopment and the limited amount of development that can take place, I do not see a dramatic change. I do not see major changes in traffic, in character of the community. I think the design guidelines in this ordinance override just about everything. It will be an improved aesthetic. I don't have a problem with 15-foot setbacks, if at all, during the next 5 to 10 years. So at this point in time, if people choose to call me an idiot, why do we live in? I am of the opinion at this point in time that I think this ordinance is probably a benefit to that area. I do not see dramatic change, and that's a position I'm going to hold on to unless I'm otherwise proven incorrect by staff or consultants or others that the potential for going to see, and when I've heard the maximum that could occur along this corridor is something like 60 or 80 apartments spread out, I don't see a dramatic change in the character. I have a graduate degree in city and regional planning. I worked with a developer years ago at Hershey's Mill, the Wooldridge Company. I worked for the County Planning Commission as a planner, a county and a local planner. I've seen what's going on over 30 years in East Bradford Township. I understand these ordinances, I think, better than a lot of people. Can I see the future exactly? No. But I think that there also has been some incendiary and limited information that fouled the whole process to be able to exchange civil dialogue and an atmosphere of sharing. And at the end of the day, if someone disagrees, okay, but that doesn't mean that they're an idiot and that they have no integrity and you can't trust them. That is an unfair portrayal, fair, and that's not the way I want to see our society develop. So that's Mike Lynch at the moment. I may change, as we like to say in the world of politics these years, and I don't like to consider myself a politician because I am not. Our positions, if we have an open mind, will evolve. I'm not flip-flopping on anything, but I'm keeping my ears and eyes open, and I respect every resident that's here when they have comment. when they're not antagonistic and they offer an explanation as to how they came to that opinion and why they feel the way they do. And if it has substance, I'm going to listen to it. And if it is not grounded in anything but emotion and a diatribe that has been mob generated, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to accept that in our society or here in East Goshen Township. That's just my position, my opinion at this point.
Mike,
Yeah.
clear, there's a significant number of people that don't want this to happen in the first place, let alone whatever's going to go in there. One of the things that we said the other night is that any discussion about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, or anything involved, it goes on the agenda. And if Dan and his forces want to get 400 people, they get 400 people. If we're going to, whatever, if we have to go to school every meeting, we go to school every meeting because that's the largest place we can possibly get. But listening to Dan, he probably takes the opposite position that you do. And I would, those that would be a follower of Dan and his, they are going to probably argue like mad against whether or not we should do this. I think the board is going to have to come to an understanding of what it wants to do going forward. We have 2 new people on here that are going to be involved in this now.
Process-wise.
Well,
we even get to it.
The board still has to decide what it wants to do.
That's right.
It hasn't done that yet. But if we do that, we got to do it in a public forum. And everybody that's involved in this has got to know it's going to take place. That's one of the reasons that it wasn't on the agenda tonight, because that's not something to be talked about tonight. But at some point, once the board feels comfortable doing it, they're going to have a meeting, and we're going to have to discuss the pros and cons of doing it whatever way we think is the way to do it.
And I will continue to put forth my suggestion of an residents that came that fateful night. We'll go to come to that open house and be able to exchange and see that we're not idiots. We do have integrity. There's no hidden agenda. This process of the comprehensive plan and the master plan for the Paley Pike Corridor, as I said in my note, it's been an extensive and extended process over several years. And if you've been participating in those documents, this was part of the expectation that was going to come out to look at this traditional neighborhood development concept to, again, I'll use the word, my opinion, improve the corridor. But I've said all along, I've said it for months, I don't think this ordinance, I was not in favor of apartment complexes and buildings. But beyond that, with where we are at the moment, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact over the short term, let alone the long term. I'll be curious to see if that ordinance was adopted in its present form. I'll be real surprised to see any kind of to be able to say, there, not much has happened. But maybe we got rid of that place up there on the corner, which should not ever been there. And maybe something else happens that's a little more vital and a little more of interest. And aesthetically, maybe there'll be an improvement instead of just what we have now, which I think is a bit of a mishmash and not very effective for the landscape that we have overall in the township and the quality that we can portray here. Yeah, I've said it. I've reiterated myself.
Mike, can we take this to vote now?
I don't know what we're talking about. I left you.
We're in the appointing those that.
We've already done it. We're done.
Did we do that?
It's done.
We did do that?
We did.
We're up to Jim Bonet.
Jim Bonet. Jim Bonet is a supervisor in Thornbury Township, and he has been put forth as being the supervisor to be represented on the police commission from Thornbury.
That's a continuation.
And that is his role. He has been, and that would be a continuation. It's up to us to say yea or nay.
I would motion that Jim Benoit be our at-large commissioner.
Second.
Okay, any comments out there? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
John obviously is going to just meet Jim when you're.
I hope so.
Yeah, he's solid. He's a director, he's a solid guy.
Yes.
Oh, Which way?
Yeah.
5-0?
Oh, I know. How
I don't know, is it
Hawaii.
5-0 or 4-0?
Hawaii.
It's 4-1 or 5-0?
Great minds think.
There we go.
How about Madison?
Okay, the next thing we gotta do is we gotta look at the bids for Allen, well, PennDOT's going out to bids for section C, D, and E, which is runs from Enterprise Drive or Reservoir Road up to Payway, up to 352, to catch up to what's already been done or which will be done with respect to that phase.
We're just confirming their selection of the low quality.
We have to agree with them in terms of
Right, brand.
and Allen Beers is the lowest
Right.
responsible bidder. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll move.
Is there a second to
I'll
that?
second
effect? Okay, is there comments up here to the board? There's gotta be some comments.
I'm not voting for it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Anybody out there want to say anything? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Three to two. 3-2.
3-2. You got it.
With mutual respect for all our positions, period. I'm gonna continue to say that when we choose to vote and disagree, that's what we have to do.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we have to do.
We're allowed to do anything we feel we want to do. The last thing on the agenda is to authorize the chairman to sign a stormwater,
I'll make a motion.
agreement for, what was the address here? I forget.
145 Dutch Mill. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Having a problem staying awake, I think. Okay, any comments? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Beautiful, done, thank you. I don't see anything else, is there correspondence? Oh, there's the,
Fourth quarter, right, no, has everybody reviewed it? We don't need to go through that, unless you have something special.
There's the any other matter.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about any other
There's the
matter.
any other matter. Is that something that we're skipping?
If we had something, we would have brought it up.
If there's something that you want to bring up.
I do.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take this opportunity to motion that we reopen the budget to look at the millage rate.
Second.
you are reopened the budget for a period of time.
Right.
And then you are.
And it's not
Very
because,
short period of time.
it's not because we think anything ill of John. He does a phenomenal job actually with managing the funds that are provided. But it's something that I'd like to just look at our millage rate and consider possibly looking at dropping that millage rate by 0.25, at least for a temporary period of
You have
time.
as new supervisor, you had the right to, for a period of time, to open up the budget
Mhm.
and bring it back. It gets voted on, and depending upon where 3-2, 4-0, 4-1, 5-0 goes, that's.
So we don't need to make a motion and a vote on that. Is
I
that
don't
correct?
think a motion's necessary.
Well, no, I don't think you have to make a motion,
So-
right? You
so
have the right to do
We'll
it.
meet with John.
There's a time period that it has to occur in.
Right, and it has to occur now.
Mike, may I make a point? We didn't come up with this to make a big inference or
No,
something like that. We came up with this because there's only a very short period of time when it can be
Yeah.
reopened. And that's.
We just want to make sure that we're looking at that.
Regardless of the reason, you're allowed to do it.
Oh, yeah, and then you'll have an opportunity to meet with John and we'll
Right.
get details from Rick, and I think that would be a good thing to do.
Because I'm not sure how this works.
I think there's a 30-day period.
I think they cut that back and.
It's a little shorter.
Oh, is it shorter than that?
It's
Yeah,
shorter than that.
it's short because I think there has to be, an act.
You have to re-advertise, but.
Right.
That's only if there's a change though.
But it has to be done by like February 15th or something like that.
Well, you may decide not to do anything.
Exactly.
We may.
We just want to look.
We would like to talk to John.
Reopen
I
it,
think that'd
take a
be
look at
great.
that.
I think that'd be really
Okay.
good to do.
Yeah.
So there's no really a motion other than.
We
They
just
made a
want to,
motion.
we're expressing our interest in discussing
They
that.
made a motion, it was seconded. So somebody got to dispose of the motion.
Okay. I can withdraw the motion then if you wish.
But wait, can we,
Maybe not.
I wanna.
Wait.
Let John.
John's
I
check.
gotta.
John's checking.
So you're suggesting then that on a one-member board, one member can raise his hand and say, I want to reopen the budget? Without the majority?
Let's take me. I go by myself, like to, my time. If I was reelected, I could open the budget. I have the right to open the budget and to bring what my findings are back to the board, which may be keep it as it is or do
Right.
something different.
And what you said is also true, then the board has a right to vote one up or down.
Up or down.
So, okay,
I
so
don't
then,
think, I don't think.
so-
John, let John speak, go ahead.
during the month of January following any municipal election, the Board of Supervisors may amend the budget and the levy and tax rate to conform with its amended budget. A period of, so in other words, the board, we'd have to find, as I read that, you'd have to find expenditure savings to offset.
The
So
quarter,
that
say in
would
this
be-
case, a quarter mil.
Yeah, so that would be off the top of my head, something like
$400,000.
$400,000 we have to have in expenditure cuts.
That's great.
It took me 10 minutes to figure out how much it would be.
But,
Did you find out what the timeline
and then,
is?
so let's see, a period of 10 days public inspection at the office of the township secretary of the proposed amended budget after notice by the township secretary to that effect is published once in newspaper and then circulation. So intervene between the adoption. So we have to advertise, and then there has to be a 10-day inspection period.
You'd have a meeting by the 28th or something like that, is that?
Yeah, any amended budget must be adopted by the board of supervisors on or before the 15th day of February. That's
Okay.
gonna be tricky though, because we have to get bills out by the 1st.
Right.
Didn't say you can't pay bills.
No, we have to get the tax bills out.
Oh, tax bills.
First, we have to do that under the law.
So,
Proposed amended budget shall be
We'll get through
before
it.
final adoption be revised upward. No proposed amended budget shall, before final adoption, be revised upward, okay, in excess of 10%, the aggregate of 25%.
John, are you okay? Mr. Truitt has a question.
Yeah,
Over here.
yes.
You get the thrill of speaking in the microphone.
Okay, yes, I want to speak. My name is George Truitt. You all know I'm Dad's father.
oh,
My question to the board and Michelle's comment was, up or down or what?
so it's the millage rate, the tax rate,
Oh.
not military, but the millage, and it's 1.25. And John and I would like to review it and see if there's any wiggle room in the budget at all to consider dropping that down, at least temporarily.
Oh, so you want to go down?
We
Okay.
want to go down,
Fine, thank you.
maybe
Good
not.
to see you, Mr. Truitt, nice to see you. Now, obviously, when you guys meet, the one thing that will be a wild card that we don't know, and John, you're gonna be right in the middle of it, is the arbitration. We know
Police
that,
arbitration.
the number, we're almost certain that the number for police that's in the budget now is gonna be higher.
Okay,
Whether it's higher by $250,000 or more, that's a real wild card. So that'll be something that John will give you the details on. But that's, gentlemen, that's the way we understand that as a wild card. That with the current budget, that's not reflected in there yet.
okay,
So that will play against.
Whatever
the other
savings we
fund.
find.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's one particular element that will weigh
okay,
on the side to kind of leave it alone. But that's, you guys will work on that.
okay.
And I'm certainly supportive of you guys learning more about it, and see what you know.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So we're going to re-advertise the budget? I'm still not
I don't know.
fully.
They have the
sense of
right,
what
they have the right for some period of time to review the budget, and that review has to be consummated by such and such a date, if they're going to change something. I don't know what the dates are, because I must apologize for not being able to hear very well tonight, because of
But I suggest, Marty, I would suggest that, if you will, that John or Rick talk to Kristen and say, we've had the inquiry from our new board members, they would like to look at the budget. Under the current process, would you please set this up for us so we know procedurally that we're correct, that we don't foul the process, and that we stay within the time parameters, et cetera. It's worth a couple hours of Kristen's opinion time to make sure we're on a good track there with the process.
But working back,
I haven't gone through this myself.
if the deadline is the 15th, you have to have at least 10 days. So that they would have to come back with something by the second meeting in
Oh,
January.
Yeah.
Because that's the next official meeting.
okay. So there's still a motion on the table. Do we just table the motion then, or withdraw the motion?
I think withdraw it.
There's no need, we'll withdraw the motion and leave it at that. That's fine.
just tell them that you're going to do it.
Who's tired? Anybody tired? Oh, John, come on.
Keep going.
Oh, I'll see you at the gym tomorrow morning.
All right.
You will. Aqua never die.
I gotta go to work.
Anybody else in any other matter?
Now,
Any other
Sign this
matter?
up.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
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 Good 2020, everybody. Safe, healthy, prosperous. Mr. Druitt, nice to see you. And Mr. Druitt, nice to see you. Appreciate it.
Not as nice.
Talk to each other many times a year.